I would like to extend a warm welcome to all members of the Planning Committee, officers and members of the public in attendance at today's meeting. I am Councillor Christine Ward, Chairman of the Planning Committee. I would now like to hand over to Democratic Services to read the housekeeping rules.
Please note this meeting is being broadcast live on the Council's website and on YouTube. It will remain available for a minimum of 12 months. I'd like to remind those in attendance to use your microphone when speaking and to turn it off when you've finished. Please switch any mobile devices to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting. If the fire alarm rings, please can everyone leave the room immediately using the nearest fire exit. Do not use the lift. Please go to the fire assembly point located at the bottom of the car park by the garages.
Thank you. Do we have apologies, please?
Apologies have been received from Councillor Barry Rickman and Councillor Janet Richards.
Thank you. Members, can we now confirm the minutes for the meeting on the 12th of February as being correct? Thank you. Declarations of interest, please. Councillor Riley.
Calmore Croft Farm, Salisbury Road, Calmore. Application number 24/10-199. It's in my ward.
Councillor Woods.
Application 24/1037. It's in my ward.
Councillor Penny.
Thank you, Chair. 24/10199 Calmore Croft Farm. I actually sit on the planning committee for Tottenham Town Council, but do not vote.
Councillor Sleep.
Ditto, Chairman.
Walton's application number 24/10656 and Walcott House application number 25/10058. They're both in my ward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davies.
Application 25/10039 Woodbury to Viney Road. I sit on the planning committee on limited payment to town council, although I was not at that meeting and did not have a position.
That has been withdrawn. Okay. Councillor Hawkins.
Yes, the proposed TPO, 6 Albert Road, New Milton, that's in my town council, and I do sit on the planning. So I won't take part in any of it.
Oh, sorry.
We'll now go to the first application. Calmore Croft Farm, Salisbury Road, Calmore, Netley Marsh. Application number 24/10199, and you'll find this on page 7 of the agenda. We have one speaker, Mr. Stuart Goodwill, who is the agent. So I'll hand over to James, please, for the presentation.
Good morning, councillors. This application is an outline application for the principle of the use of the land outlined in red for employment development for business. Storage and distribution. Proposals for access are provided in detail. The appearance, layout, landscape, and scale of the development and the future application.
Do you want to start again? Do you need...
So I'm just waiting to see. We have turned the microphone on. Okay, I'll go again. So good morning, councillors. This application before you today is an outline application for the principle of the use of the land outlined in red for employment development for businesses falling within use classes B2, general industrial, and B8, storage and distribution. Proposals for access are provided in detail and under consideration today. However, the appearance, layout, landscape and scale of development are reserved for future applications. This application is brought before the committee because it relates to one of the council's strategic development sites and the comments of Netley Marsh Parish Council objecting to the proposals. Turning to the local context of the site. The site falls within the built-up area of Totton, beyond the northern edge of Calmore, but within strategic site SS1, land north of Totton. The black line you can see wrapping around the edge of the site and beyond, land to the north, is the edge of the built-up areas defined by the proposals map. It's located to the south of Salisbury Road, one of the main roads in and out of Totton, adjacent to the A326 dual carriageway, which provides direct access to the M27 motorway. The A326 separates the site from the New Forest National Park, being the land coloured yellowy beige to the west of the site. There is a bridleway running across the south of the site, although not directly abutting it, intervening land separating it from the application site. There are listed buildings close to the site, here within the National Park, Shorn Hill, on Hill Street, to the south on Paulet's Lane, and outside the allocation, but also close to the northeast of the A36 at Little Testwood. The green areas highlighted or shown on the plan highlight TPOs on the site and around the site. You can see how they cross the site and cover trees in close proximity to it. An aerial photo of the site, more clearly showing the existing mix of uses and character of the area. Mixed grazing fields and on the western portion, former pigsties and agricultural uses, now in use as a construction depot, are present on the site. Previously 3 houses on the site, 2 bungalows located here and a residential house fronting onto Salisbury Road there. There are, however, residential neighbours still present to the east and the south, and an area of industrial units outside the application site already in operation adjacent to it. You can see in some extent, the similarities, consistency between the existing use and character of the site with land beyond in the national park, giving you a flavour of the wider character of the area and how the national park is in use and characterised in that part of the in that part of the national park adjacent to the district. So as I referred to earlier, the site is within the built-up area, but also it is within strategic site SS1. The mix of uses included in policy SS1 seeks to deliver around 5 hectares of land for business and employment uses. This is shown on the concept master plan supporting the policy, being in the northwest corner of the site, coloured purple, bluey purple there on the plan that's in your local plan supporting policy SS1. This is the range and mix of uses that is proposed by SS1, and as I say, that does include specific reference to employment business uses within that allocation. So the site specifically in context to the strategic site allocation and its supporting master plan. The site is outlined in red there. You can see how it closely matches the illustrative master plan and the approach of that master plan in terms of defining and directing appropriate development to different parts of the wider allocation. So turning to some photos of the site. Here we have the end of the lay-by on the north side of Salisbury Road. Salisbury Road in the junction with the slip roads onto the A326. The location of the proposed access into the development site in place of this line of trees, Leylandite type hedge trees, And then looking from the slip road on the A326, looking across the A36 towards the application site beyond those lines of trees. This is the A36 as it descends towards the roundabout on the slip roads for the northbound carriageway of the A326. There's the bridge of the A36 crossing the A326 and the site beyond the line of trees that are on the highway verge and the edge of the application site. There you can see the A326 and the bridge of the A36, the extent of landscape and trees on the highway verge on either side of the A326, with the national park being beyond those trees and the highway verge on the right-hand side of this right-hand photo. Again, looking back at the site from across the A36 and the lay-by that's on that northern side, the application site is beyond the immediate land behind these trees. What I really wanted to do here was capture longer views of the site and of the A36, and importantly that telecommunications mast, which for reference purposes is at 20 metres high, so you can get a sense of the scale of the trees in the foreground and some trees in the background in the distance in relation to a fixed point of this being 20 metres high. Looking at the inside internals of the site, I referred to a construction compound. This is what's located on the eastern portion of the application site that you could see on the aerial photos. Well, this is the range of activities that are going on there. And the crane that many of you will recognise as being on the site in longer distance views if you've ever been past that part of the district in the recent past. It's a fairly visible feature. It also shows some of the plateau hard surfacing and change in levels that have already occurred, therefore being part and parcel of the character of that site, that part of the site. Obviously, all of this will go as part of redevelopment proposals should the application be supported today, but it's give you a sense of activities already undertaken on the site. Moving to the western portion of the site, more agricultural fields, grazing fields. Bottom photo is looking to the west, and that's the line of trees running alongside the A326. So with the national park in the distance beyond that, again, give you a flavour for the scale and size of the trees that are surrounding the site. And also trees running through the centre of the site, substantial height, significant crown spreads. Creating a division between existing fields, making up the application site. Looking from the bridleway to the south, you can make out again the crane, feature of being able to identify where the site is. The fields in the foreground are outside the application site, which begins with basically this tree being located on the boundary to land. Beyond that, is where the site rises up to the application site and where the proposals are located. And again, the substantive trees beyond this initial area of open space is the edge of the application site. So what we have before us is an outline application proposing use of the land for up to 22,000 square metres floor space of employment development. That is going to be within use classes B2, general industrial, and B8, storage and distribution. We have before us the detailed proposals for the access from Salisbury Road. So the proposed scheme. On the left, in the context of the policy concept master plan. On the right, showing the parameter of where, within the red line, the physical development would occur. Not all of this land would be covered in buildings, but could include some form of supporting development, such as parking areas, hard surfaces, or site compounds. Should be noted that the application site extends into part of the strategic site considered appropriate for residential development. So that's the light brown colour on this plan, being the extract from the concept master plan supporting the policy. And I remind you, bluey purple colour is the area nominally illustratively identified as being appropriate for the employment development that the policy seeks to deliver. This overlap has been considered in detail in the case officer report and concludes that it is an acceptable scenario for two important factors. Firstly, the importance to the overall economy of the district of delivering additional employment opportunities, complementing overall sustainable growth, especially in the face of lack of other strategic sites delivering employment development to date. So in your local plan, there are, in the same way that there are housing sites identified to meet the objectively assessed housing needs, there is land identified for employment growth. Now, several of the strategic sites have been identified as being able to deliver employment floor space, this being one of them, one in Ringwood, and of course Forley being others. Neither the Ringwood nor the Forley sites are expected to deliver any employment in the short term. As we know, the Forley proposals have fallen away and been withdrawn, and we do not have proposals on the Ringwood site at this time. So in terms of making contribution towards meeting our aspirations for employment growth, additional floor area on this site is considered to be appropriate and good use of the site in terms of meeting demand, need and trajectories for achieving employment opportunities. The second aspect as to why this is considered an acceptable use of the additional land is looking at housing delivery across SS1. The total for housing delivered, the running total for housing being delivered in SS1 towards the policy requirement of 1,000 homes currently stands at 614. You'll recognise these various development sites as applications that have come before you in the recent past, and that's the total that we have at present. Based on the amount of land remaining, it is considered unlikely that strategic site won't be capable of reaching the 1,000 home target. I mean, we see huge swathe of land on this western portion and central portion of the allocation is not yet subject to any applications, approved or resolved to grant. And given what we've achieved so far with your support, it's considered likely that the remaining land will certainly achieve at least the 400 that we require to achieve the minimum target of 1,000 homes. So the minor overlap there of employment land into nominally housing land is not considered to compromise the likelihood of that policy target being met. So I referred to access being in detail. Here we have a detailed plan of the proposed access arrangements for the application sites. The application site is to the south of Salisbury Road running east to west, left to right across the plan there, and the A326 slip road extending to the north. So full details are proposed for vehicular access to the site from Salisbury Road. It will form a traffic light control crossroad junction with the A36 and southbound A326 slip roads. Local Plan Policy SS1 makes specific reference to this junction, repeated here, requiring us to assess the need for and to provide, when necessary, enhancements to the A326 and A36 junction to provide safe vehicular access for the development. These proposals will deliver the enhancements required to accommodate all of the traffic generated by strategic site SS1, as well as background growth for Totton. So up until this point, the housing applications that we have dealt with, and you may recall officers referring you to this, have taken financial contributions towards upgrading this junction. Now, those monies are held by Hampshire County Council, who would look to make use of those monies at a point when they have sufficient funds to undertake alterations to this junction that would likely be introducing traffic light control movements. However, this application requires this scale of intervention in order to make its access safe and sufficient for the capacity of vehicle movements that it will generate. So this is seen as a positive benefit of the application, that it would deliver these improvements now or in early stages of the evolution and development of the wider SS1 application. So right-hand turn, the design of the junction, as I say, accommodates the wider allocation and background growth. And in order to be safe, it introduces right-hand turns when approaching the slip road and approaching the site to turn into the site and turn into the slip road, straight on lanes and straight on from the slip road into the application site, and maintaining straight on left and right along the A36. Now the highway verge, the adopted highway, extends vastly beyond the carriageway in this area, so there's ample space within the highway to accommodate the additional lanes, the wider lanes, and ensure that the junction can be accommodated within the highway and meet the congestion, the capacity and space requirements for the manoeuvring of larger vehicles. This has been subject to extensive discussion with Hampshire County Council officers who support the scheme. In addition, National Highways have assessed the impact on Junction 2 of the M27 and have no objections either. So this scheme comes before you with the full support of Highways officers, both locally and nationally. And there are no technical reasons why this can't be supported or will have residual highway safety impacts of any concern. Non-vehicular access will also be provided for. In order to support sustainable forms of travel by employees, options to access the site by walking and cycling have been identified. These will allow more direct routes to other parts of SS1 where employees may live, or with options for onward travel to bus stops on Salisbury Road or south towards Calmore and Totton. So what we would look to secure is an opportunity to exit and access the site in the corner here, where there is currently vehicular access for the existing user, as well as taking a route out to Salisbury Road and the option of delivering improvements with a pedestrian cycleway along the edge of Salisbury Road towards the roundabout that will be delivered by Blaw's and provide crossing points on the western arm of the Blaw's roundabout that will serve the residential development to the north. That will allow onward travel, as I say, by pedestrians and cyclists into the residential areas, or making use of pedestrian cycle routes heading east towards the bus stops on Salisbury Road. Returning to the proposed developable areas within the site, so the area that is considered appropriate for the actual built form surfacing that I described earlier. The scheme has considered the strategic landscape around the site, most notably the lines of trees across the site and around the edges, to define areas for development. Having identified the location of the access and the space required to preserve those important lines of trees, it has identified opportunities for additional landscape setting to preserve the character of the area. You can see here the lines of trees that cross the site. You'll recall them from the aerial photo and the site photos. These will all be retained, an appropriate setting given to them in order to avoid future impacts. This is confirmed by overlaying the developable areas on the tree protection plans, the hatching being the area around the trees that's required for preserving and avoiding impact on root zones of the trees, and the developable areas sitting outside of those protection areas. There are, however, trees to be removed to facilitate the development. However, these are predominantly low category trees that are not considered to be constraints to development of the site. And most notably across the frontage, where there is a line of evergreen trees that we remove to facilitate the access. However, that would allow views into the site and more visibility of these large, prominent, dominant trees that extend along former field boundaries through the site. All high quality and important trees are retained and preserved by the proposal. This makes an important contribution towards maintaining the dominance of trees, the containment of the development within those existing heavily treed boundaries. In addition to the proposed use and parameter of developable areas, the application presents limits on building heights, recognising the sensitivity of the edges of the site and proximity to the boundary of the New Forest National Park. Limits on the heights of buildings to be considered by reserve matters applications will have to be within the 12.5 metres and 15.5 metre high heights as set, shown in pink and beige respectively. So as I described to you, the National Park being beyond the A326, considered a constraint to larger buildings in this part of the application site where a limit of 12.5 metres height will be set. Similarly, proximity to the road and in this location where we may see further development on this parcel of land, the heights are restricted to 12.5 metres high. Now, many of the trees around the site are at least 20 metres high, and as identified in the photos of the site, the mobile phone mast located close to Salisbury Road, highlighted in red there, is also 20 metres high. Taller buildings would be in more central locations and where ground drops to the south. So I highlighted that structure and the height of the trees along the frontage in order to give you a sense of the extent of screening that the existing landscape setting will provide. It's not going to make the buildings invisible or not visible, but it's certainly going to obscure views of them and contain them more readily than if the site had more open boundaries. Yeah, it is recognised that the development will change the character of the area. However, such a change is an inevitable consequence of allocating the land to contribute to meeting the district's employment and housing needs over the plan period. Yeah, that's one important factor, of course, that whilst we see in those photos open green fields and limited development around the site, the land around the site is part of the wider allocation, and ultimately the character of the area will change as development occurs, as identified by the concept master plan. Restricting the heights and areas of development as shown ensures important landscape features around and across the site will be retained. Along with opportunities for additional landscape setting and screening, the development will not be a prominent or harmful addition to the area, and it will contribute to furthering the purposes of the New Forest National Park by locating development outside that area and not having a significant impact on its purposes. So in summary, conditions are included in the recommendation to deal with technical matters relating to drainage, contaminated land, construction management, ecological enhancements, and to preserve the amenities of existing residents. The scheme proposes major employment development in the built-up area of Totton, one of the highest tier settlements in the district, generating employment in a range of roles close to existing residential areas. It's an outline application for up to 22,000 square metres of employment development, with defined developable areas as shown in those plans and maximum building heights as described. Detailed proposals for access from Salisbury Road are under consideration. However, the appearance of the scheme, its detailed landscape design, detailed layout and scale are reserved for future applications. In conclusion, development is in accordance with the New Forest Local Plan. It will preserve highway safety and deliver infrastructure enhancements required by Policy SS1. It has economic, environmental and social benefits, delivering a sustainable development, and there are no other material considerations or significant impacts that demonstrably outweigh the benefits. It's therefore recommended that that delegated authority be given to the service manager to grant permission, subject to completion of a Section 106 agreement to secure highway infrastructure, a travel plan and associated financial bond, and biodiversity net gain monitoring, and is subject to the conditions as set out in your report. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a very comprehensive report. A lot of work gone into that. We'll go to Mr. Stuart Goodwill, who is the agent, planning agent. You have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I would like to thank the officers on their proactive approach to this application. The scheme before you is an outline for the delivery of up to 22,000 square metres of employment land for B2 and B8 uses, with all matters reserved, other than access. This development will provide 17% of the entire employment need set out within the local plan for the full plan period, and will deliver over 31% of the allocated employment land needed. To date, neither Fawley or Ringwood have come forward. The development makes a significant contribution to the employment need and is crucial to the delivery of adopted policy STR6, Sustainable Economic Growth, and Strategic Site 1, north of Totton. The jobs created from the proposal, both during construction and in operation, will be a significant economic catalyst for the local area, and the provision of new employment opportunities in close proximity to the new and emerging residential areas will make an important contribution to achieving a mixed, balanced and sustainable community, and is key to the successful implementation of the development plan policies. It is likely that the development, once constructed, will create between 400 and 600 jobs directly on site, with significantly more supported through servicing and support companies and local spend. This proposal will have a huge positive impact on the economic vitality of the area. With a global partner ready and waiting to develop the site, this scheme is a substantial and significant investment in the economic future of New Forest District. The site is in a prime location with excellent links to the local and national highway network, making it a sustainable location for employment site. The new access will be formed off of Salisbury Road, and we have engaged in significant consultation and discussion with your officers, Hampshire Highways and National Highways, with amendments subsequently made to the scheme. The proposal before you today has their full support. In terms of the scale of the development, the application sets out the areas of the site which could be developed for up to 22,000 square metres. The development areas and height parameters have been carefully sculpted to respect the setting of the site in proximity to the national park and wider views. The area for development fully sits within the existing field patterns of the site and protects the two significant tree belts that run north to south and the boundary trees. Great care has been taken to ensure a landscape-led development framework for this important employment site. Elected members will note there is limited objection to this scheme, and those objections cited are generally more correctly considered in the reserved matters application, such as car parking levels, swift boxes. The application fully accords with the local plan, fully accords with the MPPF, and fundamentally helps deliver key adopted strategic policies in the local plan. We therefore respectfully request that you endorse your officer's recommendation and approve the scheme. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members now have questions to Mr. Goodwill or to the officers. Councillor.
I'm not entirely certain it's fully in conformity with the local plan. I think it's the active travel side of things. Speaking as someone who doesn't drive, I'm always interested to see what provision is provided for people to actually walk somewhere. And this is not a very accessible location for anyone wanting to walk anywhere. Obviously, you've got two busy roads, a high level of congestion, and the bus service is less than desirable, having regularly getting the bus in that area. So I think it is going to be, and as much as, and it always happens with developments on the edge of settlements, as much as they say that they will provide active travel, it's always going to be.
Councillor Davis, what's the question? You're going into debate.
My question is, how does this conform to, I think it's policy STR1, to improve accessible. I mean, that's for the officers to answer.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. I mean, yes, you're right. At present, it perhaps not one of them readily accessible by modes of travel other than the private car. But clearly, as the allocation is delivered, more options will become available in terms of dedicated routes for pedestrians and cyclists. We've endeavoured to secure opportunities for this scheme to integrate with the adjoining parcels of development and the adopted highway. So this plan, the blue lines running along the edge of the site are proposed to be cycle pedestrian routes to the edge of the site. that will then connect in, as I was describing, to routes within the Blore Homes development that will provide safe routes to the bus stops that are to the east on Salisbury Road. And ultimately, it is aspired that this route to the northeast corner of the application site will connect into any future development that occurs on the parcels of land that we can just see in the corner of this site, from which additional routes will be available, secured as part of those developments to other parcels to the south of the application site within SS1. So it's starting to create a network of routes through the wider allocation that will then dovetail with those available in Calmore, that will get you through to the existing residential areas and opportunities for onward travel towards Totton. We know that the residential schemes are contributing financially to the Hampshire County Council project for improving routes through to Totton along the A36 corridor. So along with preparing and operating a travel plan, this application, this scheme will become more accessible to people who choose to use the bus, walk or cycle to work.
Thank you. Councillor Dowd.
Thank you. I have 3 questions, 2 for the officer and 1 for Mr. Goodwill. I noticed that there have been some objections with runoff from the site that have been raised. And I also noticed that the county has got no objections in terms of flooding and that sort of thing. What conditions are being imposed to minimise the issues with runoff from the site, and are you satisfied they're going to be stringent enough?
Would you like me to answer that one first, and then
I'll if you can do
yeah,
that, then
yeah,
I
that's
think
perfect.
it's probably easier.
I mean, yes, you know, there are issues around flooding along the public right-of-way, the bridleway to the south of the site, where there is existing ditches and streams associated with just general surface water runoff in the area during extreme periods of rain. This application will result in large areas of hard surfacing that will inevitably capture that rain, and if not managed and captured, would obviously run off faster. However, the scheme endeavours to integrate a drainage scheme that will reduce runoff to current greenfield rates, and is probably going to be an enhancement over the existing situation whereby, sorry, that's the wrong way. Just go back to some photos to show the areas of hard surfacing that are unlikely to have that capacity of drainage integrated with them already, and any brownfield rate runoffs will be improved to greenfield rate runoffs to actually improve the situation with regard to surface water drainage.
Thank you. My second point is I'm really quite concerned about the comment that it's difficult to model the impact at pinch points on the 326. What are the difficulties with modelling that, and how confident can we be that the impact on the 326 particularly is going to be acceptable? I appreciate the County Council has put no objections to it, but I have to say I'm a bit concerned about the statement that it was difficult to model.
Can you direct me to where that statement is? Is it something in my report or in one of those reporting?
No, I can't.
I mean, I didn't refer to it in my presentation, so I'm not quite sure what pinch points on the A326 you may have.
No, I've gone past it. Sorry, I haven't made a note of that. It was, I mean, I've quoted it in my notes here. And it says there are pressure points on the 326, and it was difficult to model at peak points. That was the comment in the report. But,
I know in my report I made reference to concerns raised by members of the public about the consequence of busy days at Fulton's Park and the potential for the roundabout on the northern slip road to be congested.
I'm thinking particularly about Junction 2.
Okay. I mean, that's, as you said yourself, being given a clean bill of health by National Highways, and where our Hampshire colleagues are involved on the local roads, are also given a clean bill of health. So I'm not aware of any residual concerns regarding highway safety or capacity arising from the proposals.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just ask Mr Goodwill if he can throw any light on this, please?
That was it, yeah.
Yeah, I may be able to help. So during the course of the discussions we had on this site, one of the queries raised by National Highways on Junction 2 was they needed us to do some more modelling work to check in terms of capacity and flow. So that was in the initial stages. So then we went back and we did that extra modelling and shared that with National Highways, and they've obviously analysed it, and that's when they came back finally with their no objection on the A326 and linked through to Junction 2. So I don't know whether that's where it's come from, but there's been a process of work that's happened, and that extra modelling was done by our consultants and shared during the course of the process. So I don't know whether that helps.
And my question to Mr Goodwell is, I note that you considered the noise restriction measures could be too restrictive. I'm pleased to see that obviously the established trees, the high value trees, are being retained, but there's no indication. It might be because this is an outline plan rather than a detailed plan. There doesn't seem to be any new tree development near where housing will be, and obviously noise pollution is a concern for communities, particularly around vehicle movements, with the reversal signals making life really challenging for people who live close to those sorts of sites. Can you assure me that there are going to be considerations for green buffers between the vehicle movements and any possible dwellings?
So yeah, so you're absolutely right. Noise is a pertinent issue, and one that we've worked closely with the officers. Obviously, because this is an outline scheme at the moment, the final layout of where the buildings go, obviously the buildings themselves can create a noise buffer between the residential, depending where the actions are. So yes, there will be a detailed landscape plan submitted as part of the reserve matters, which will enhance boundary planting. But equally, what we're also looking at is noise is a bit of a dark art, but the accepted levels is about 5 decibels above background noise level. So obviously that's where you'd normally work within an acceptable parameter with residential. So that's what we've been working at with the officers, and also we'll be looking at noise management plans in terms of, you talk about the reverse beepers, there's different reverse beepers that you can get. Any plant can have different mufflers on, so that will all be part of the Reserve Matters application, but it's absolutely forefront of our mind, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Wade.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, it's a very detailed presentation, by the way. Well done. Yeah, I've got a couple of procedural things. I noticed that we have an objection from archaeology, but under the conditions, you've addressed that. But I'm looking at the objection from the design team. I can't see where that's addressed in the conditions because it said the design isn't appropriate. I just wondered, I probably missed it. Can you just clarify where that's covered?
Well, as I think Mr. Goodall mentioned with local residents, of course, aspects of the design will certainly unravel in respect of the details we'll get with reserve matters. Their concern was more to do with landscape visual impact and the I suppose, a critical analysis of the applicant's landscape visual impact assessment. There's a little bit of different professionals approaching the same piece of work in a different manner. So turning to, I'm advised, page 30, yes, the application is supported by a landscape visual impact assessment. And I've obviously referenced there the objection from our colleagues in our design team, but also gone on to consider why we can accept the application despite that objection.
Just to clarify, we're just making a judgment call that all the positives outweigh that objection, that's all. Look at it from a purely procedural aspect. That's the question.
Thank you. I've got two more people that want to ask questions and then we'll move on to debate because I think we're going over the same ground here. Councillor Sleep.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Officer, for a good presentation. I've got two things. One thing I'd like to carry on from Councillor Dade's questions, if I may develop it. Drainage on page 36, the land drainage. We've got the preliminary scheme proposes to capture the surface water runoff, store it in underground attenuation tanks, one each for the 3 development parcels. Are we in a position that we can guarantee this is going to happen? Because I can recall we had an issue at Hyde where when the development was put in, the groundworks were done totally differently and the flooding is still an issue there because it wasn't done to plans. Can we assure that that issue is resolved on our records?
Oh, very much, yes. I mean, it's a prerequisite of any development of this scale. It's a condition of this permission that they submit a detailed drainage strategy scheme. As I say in that statement, we're obviously at sort of levels of principles at the moment, and when the details of the built form and hard surfaces is concluded, we will know exactly what the capacity requirements are. And I think the issue is much higher up on the agenda now, and better understanding of either the consequences or the importance of it. And so it's given more scrutiny than perhaps in the past, but certainly something that we are aware of and will look to safeguard.
And if I may, Chair, one final question. If I could refer you to page 18 on your presentation, you've got a very busy map showing the actual roadworks going into that area. And for the benefit of all of us, it's so busy there to look at. And obviously, we're all going to be concerned about that junction because it is very busy. It looks like on the north side, they've taken into the equation the old part of the road there in front of Brooks Farm on the width of the junctions. But on the actual image, can you point out to us where the traffic lights, are they the red bands that are going across the roads that are visible on that road entrance there? On the actual traffic lights on the road junctions, because, yeah, inside,
Okay,
outside.
so inside the application site, you can see the black line there being, I mean, this will all be subject to scrutiny as part of the Section 278 agreement with Hampshire County Council. They haven't gone through that because ultimately, until such time as it gets planning permission, they wouldn't scrutinise it and design it to that degree of detail. However, the principles shown here are considered acceptable and will, excuse me, deal with the scale of the traffic movements generated. So, suggesting here that a stop line across there with traffic lights either side, stop line with traffic lights either side, stop line with traffic lights either side, and stop line with traffic lights either side. Forward visibility being the purple lines to show as you're approaching those respective traffic lights that forward visibility is achievable, and therefore you have the sufficient time to react to changes in the lights, and any views of queuing cars is possible that are already stopped at the lights. I mean, does that answer sufficiently for
The other thing that's concerning me, we've had a situation on the M271 and the M27 where people have come off the motorway for some years they hit the lights and we've had to modify the road because there were bad accidents over years with people going to Fawley into Southampton. My concern is this runoff from the motorway down onto the 326 and then up this road. It's a very steep hill to go into this section. I just wonder if they cautioned themselves enough. If there's a tailback on the road, we're going to get the same situation as we had with the M27271.
The key driver to this whole arrangement is recognising tailbacks on the slip road and the consequences for safety on the A326 and I presume potentially all the way back towards the motorway. And so this scheme is very much designed around preventing that scenario whereby cars are queued extensively along the slip road. As I was describing during the presentation, works not dissimilar to this will occur once a sufficient amount of money is secured by Hampshire County Council as a result of the incremental development of SS1. So ultimately, whether it's this applicant who does it and will do it earlier than Hampshire County Council, or ultimately Hampshire County Council, a scheme will be designed around this junction that will look a lot like this. And we'll obviously analyse and review the potential scenarios that you're concerned about. But as I say, it is heavily designed around that being the concern that the junction hasn't got capacity to deal with it as it's laid out at present.
Thank you.
One more question. Councillor Riley, is this something different, a different question?
No, it's still about the concern about the runoff of this site going down towards the bridle path. The houses in Paulet's Lane have been getting flooded on a number of occasions and all the water runs from that direction. Now, what guarantee are the water going to be held on site, or is it going to be allowed to go down? It's on a hill, it runs down towards the bridle path, it goes, there's two drains, goes all the way through and it heads towards Paulet's Lane, and on a number of occasions in the last few years they've been getting flooded in their houses. Now, what guarantee have we got that that water can be contained and not allowed to run towards the houses in Paulet's Lane?
Well, in the first instance, obviously, this is just one part of the catchment that feeds that stream drain that runs in an easterly direction across Paulet's Lane towards the River Test and Testwood Lakes and beyond. At the moment, there is no capture control occurring on site for surface water drainage. The scheme will introduce an extensive scheme of capture control and attenuation. And I think that's the key element, that it will hold back the water until such time as it's appropriate to allow it to be released, and at rates that are no worse than they currently are. And in fact, as I was trying to describe to the other councillor who asked the question earlier, potentially better than existing because of the extent of hard surfacing that's already on the site that isn't controlled. Now, I obviously can't, the applicant can't control anything else that's going on beyond his own site that may have an impact on the water volumes that flow along that way and the consequence for the residential properties who have suffered from flooding in the recent past. But ultimately, he'll control his application site and enhance or improve the discharge rate coming from it through the infrastructure that they'll install.
Thank you. We're now going to debate, and no repetition, please. Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I know there's been sort of under the veil of questions, but we're almost going into debate the minutiae of this, which really should be saved for when detailed applications come through. This is a principle that we're giving today. We've been told by officers it's within our local plan. We can see by the presentation they have done extensive work already with the client. I think we should just go straight to the recommendation. I would like to propose the recommendation on the paper with the conditions as set out, and leave it to the officers who are clearly very competent in keeping this the way we want it. Thank you.
Thank you. I will need a seconder. Councillor.
I will second that. Yes, I will second that. My only concern in debate is the runoff or the actual backup onto the 326. When we got this facility open, we're going to get another large loads of 40-footers coming off that road up onto that estate, and they're going to be blocking that up, the same as we get into Millbrook. So it does concern me that we are going to get a runoff problem.
Thank you. Councillor Davies.
Sorry, I do think it just needs to be mentioned because something that was in the report but wasn't really mentioned beforehand was the encroachment on the residential. There's a little bit there, but not the encroachment on the earmarked site for residential development. One of the comments in the report was that it does potentially put at risk the 1,000 homes in the site there. So it feels very much like a lot of this, and I know outline applications are like that, but it does feel like a lot of it is waiting for something to happen further down the line, almost. It doesn't feel, even for an outline application, fleshed out enough. That's my opinion.
Thank you. Councillor Wade.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it's an interesting development, this. I mean, if you look at its location, it's ideal for an industrial site close to the motorway for distribution. From a more holistic view, it's an ideal application. My only concern is the impact on the A326. As representing an area that is way south of this, the A326 is the main arterial route down the waterside, down a peninsula with water on one side, hence waterside, and the national park on the other. And anything that complicates traffic flow concerns me for the residents that regularly use that to go to work and go about their daily business. One can only hope that Hampshire County Council and the developers put together a traffic system on to take traffic off that doesn't seriously negate that. But looking at it realistically, it ticks a number of boxes, and there was a very detailed presentation that I think has been mentioned already that covers most of the issues. So really, there is no reason to object this because we need employment land for all the people that are going to live around it, because we've got loads of houses we're going to be building there as well, aren't we? So, you know, the two things sort of marry together, and it is located for the distribution perspective in a good place. So I think we should support it.
Councillor Hawkins.
Yeah, my only slight concern is comments from the parish and town councils are the fact that the green energy doesn't appear to be around. And I think, you know, we should be starting to put independent energy into these areas so that when the houses come along, they're fed by green energy instead of the crap that we're using at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we've discussed this long and well enough in questions and debate, so we're going to go to the vote. So the recommendation is to grant, and that's been proposed by Councillor... Sorry? Oh, sorry. Sorry, getting ahead of myself. You have 1 minute.
Let's see if I can quickly add a few bits then. So just in terms of drainage, it's fully controlled by Condition 11, and there will be a betterment in terms of surface water drainage. At the moment, we've got uncontrolled hard standing that shears off into the ditch. It will be controlled by attenuation under the ground, which will have hydro brakes on, which will reduce it to greenfield runoff. So there is a significant betterment in terms of surface water, and it is fully controlled by Condition 11 on this prior to commencement of development. The principle of forward delivery of employment uses ahead of completed residential allows for a modal shift in terms of transport. If you deliver it too late, the modal operation of residential is established. By forward delivering and linking the pedestrian and forward proving that allows that modal shift to happen when the residential houses are occupied. In terms of heights, trees are on the boundaries of 15 to 20 metres. We've got a cap at 15.5 metres down to 12.5 metres. The telecoms mast is 20 metres in height, and the crane that you saw is at 31 metres high. So there is a significant landscape improvement. And then finally on access, it's been designed in full discussion with National Highways and HCC with absolute critical emphasis on that forward visibility to ensure that there's no backing up. And if there is backing up, then it's visible to prevent accidents. And that's all I have to add. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, back to the recommendation. So delegated authority to be given to the service manager, development manager to grant permission subject to the completion of a planning obligation entered into by way of Section 106 agreement and for the proposed conditions. And this is proposed by Councillor Frampton, seconded by Councillor Sleep. All in favour, please raise your hands. 10. Against? 1 against. That's been granted. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll now move to the next application, which is on page 55 of the agenda, application 24/10837, land adjacent to the Will Wrights Post, Salisbury Road, Burgate. We've had some updates. I trust you've all read the updates on this one. We have Mrs. Rachel Lamb, who is the agent. We have also supporting her, Sam Roos, who will answer questions, and Mr. Harrison, who's an objector. First, we'll go to the presentation. So, Mr. Belli, would you please? Sorry, were there declarations on this one? No, no declarations. Okay, so we'll go to the presentation. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, councillors, and good morning, members of the public. I'd like to present this application to you for the construction for full planning permission for a 70-bed care home on a site within a parcel of land associated with Strategic Site 18, which is an allocated site for housing in your local plan. What I'd like to do is take you briefly to the update because I wanted to add a further couple of points there, and then run through a presentation and try and steer you to the relevant sections of the report. I'd also like to then conclude by just referring to the recommendation and just briefly running through the conditions because they are important and they guide the development as it goes forward. So in terms of the update sheet, members, we've had the two letters that were on the update sheet, one from the adjoining developer and one from the applicant's agent in support in response to that. If I can continue, Members, we've had an additional letter of objection that was received after the publication of the agenda from the adjoining resident that reiterates the concerns that are already set out on your papers regarding the air source heat pumps, the noise, inadequate car parking, it being out of character and unsightly, noise and light pollution and impact on dark skies. But the objector does acknowledge that the boundary dispute that was referred to has now been resolved. So there are in total 3 letters there. The letter of concern from the adjoining developer I'll come to in the presentation, and I'll refer to why officers consider that the development should be able to go ahead with no change to the recommendation. And then just before we go into the presentation, there were 2 typos on the papers. Page 74, I can just refer you to that. Near the bottom of the page under habitat mitigation, it should say in the first sentence, the site is located in proximity to the River Avon Special Area of Conservation and New Forest SAC, not Ashdown. Which is somewhere further apart, further distant. And on page 75, second paragraph down, which starts with "in this case," it should read, "In this case, however, the type of accommodation is for Class C2, used by residents in need of care and from whom there is likely to be few, if any, trips." So that's just correcting those 2 typos. So I run through into the presentation. So the application site edged in red has been amended, and that was in relation to the concerns raised by the Wheelwrights Post property, which is directly to the north. So you have the application site edged in red. This is part of Strategic Site 18, Pennyfarthing development of the land to the west, Middleburgate developer to the land to the south, and that is part of the strategic site. So this shows an aerial photograph and shows the site in relation to the New Forest National Park. And members will understand that the New Forest National Park is a protected designated landscape where there is a duty on the part of this council to ensure that we further the aims and objectives of the National Park Authority. It's not just having regard to anymore, it is to further the aims and objectives of the National Park and the reason it is a designated landscape. So the application site there is a small parcel of grassland. It's surrounded by other green fields, as you see. What this doesn't show, however, is the allocated site. So this is part of Site 17, Augustus Avenue Estate, which is now built out. Tinkers Cross development, a part of Site 17, is also now nearly complete. So this is an old area photograph. Site 18 includes the Metis Homes development, which is now complete. And that's in this area. And then Middleburgate is this field and the field to the north there. So that's part of Middleburgate. And then the rest of this is all part of Site 18. So you see that at the moment it's in countryside, but that will change over the next few years. So in relation to the context of this, in terms of the strategic sites, so we have the 3 strategic sites in Fordingbridge, 16, 17 and 18. So the one we're dealing with today is part of Site 18. So this is a larger plan showing the application site within the brown zoned area for residential development types. And it also shows the other parts of Site 18, which has been developed by Pennyfarthing. And as I said, the Metis Home site is in that part of the site, which is now complete, and the Middleburgate application, which has a resolution to approve subject to a 106, is in that part of the site. So you see it forms part of that jigsaw, and it is the final piece of Site 18. This plan as well also shows the position of a new roundabout in that location, and I'll just come on to that in a minute. But the site is adjoining the Pennyfarthing development, and you will notice that on the next slide, which I'll show you, the Pennyfarthing Site 18 development is set out in accordance with this illustrative master plan. It's already under construction, with the first phase of 112 dwellings being constructed on behalf of Vivid Homes. by Penny Farthing Developments. Phase 2 is in this part of the site. Phase 3 is in this part, and then the larger block there is phase 4. So you see how it relates to that. And then on this part of the slide, you'll see the development proposal in relation to open space areas and the development that's proposed for the Penny Farthing development, as well as the Middle Burgate development site. So you see how it fits together with that. And there is an area of open space between this application site and the new link road. So you see the new roundabout that's been proposed on the A338. That leads into a new link road, and that will run through the whole of this site, and it will run down into Augustus Avenue, which I referred to a moment ago. So this site is adjoining open space. There are opportunities for potential linking pathways through. Penny Farthing Development have said that they're not happy with that particular proposal, but that is subject, their application has outline planning permission in this part of the site, and it's based on the illustrative master plan that you see here. So the residential zones will be pretty much as you see it in this, with further detail at reserved matter stage, and the open space zones will be as you see it here. So there is an opportunity there. So that's why the applicants have taken that opportunity to put a gate on their western boundary, so that in due course there's an opportunity perhaps to link through. If that link doesn't happen, there are other links through that can take place via pavement on the main road and then into the Middle Burgate site, and then that will link through into the Penny Farthing development to the south. So there are other opportunities. There are also opportunities on a pavement and a new pavement to be provided as part of the accommodation works for the new roundabout. So there will be an improved pavement area, and that will link you up onto the sites, onto the cycleway, and then into the link road where the bus stops will be located. So that shows it in context as it is now, as part of the countryside, but also as it is planned to be. So this shows the site layout. The application is a U-shaped building. It's 2.5 stories high. Proposed new access in this location, which is about 14 metres to the north of the existing agricultural field gate, which is in that location. The reason for the access being moved is so that it improves visibility northwards and southwards. The Highway Authority have commented on the application access, and they have no objections. There will be a requirement for a Section 278 legal agreement, and that can be dealt with as part of the Section 106, which is as part of the recommendation. So there's a new access being proposed. So the access runs into a car parking area and car parking zone, an area for drop-off for patients, ambulance bays as well. And you can see the location of the access. You can see the car parking in that darker grey areas. You'll also see in this part of the site what is a compound for a collection of plant and outbuildings associated with air source heat pumps. So there'll be no gas boilers on this site. There'll all be air source heat pumps, and also a collection of a bin storage area in that location, with a compound around that. The wheelrise post, the objector's property, there is a small number of objections on this site, but one of them has come from the objector to the north. That's their property. They have a number of outbuildings, 3 of which are converted to holiday use. This one in particular is converted into a holiday use, and some of the objections range on the impact of the car parking in relation to that building, which I'll come on to further with a more detailed plan. But it's a U-shaped building, access to the north, and then open space and landscaping on that western boundary, open space and landscaping on the eastern boundary facing the national park, and then a large central courtyard for the residents to enjoy. Now, because this is a care home, it's classed as residential development, but it's actually a different type of residential development to what you would normally see if you had an apartment block for an over 55s apartment block, of which there are many in the district, there's no restriction on occupying that other than an age restriction of being over 55, but there's no restriction in terms of your health. So whilst those apartment blocks sometimes do have visiting care staff to come and help with daily tasks, those people generally live independently of care, whereas this is the opposite. So this is a case where the residents here are dependent on care for their daily needs. So it is a different type of residential development, and it has different implications as well for things like habitat mitigation, which I'll come on to. So there is a secure area for residents because of some of the occupiers will have dementia. So there's a need to make sure that the area is secured by appropriate enclosures. And that there's, if you like, a public area to the north, which is where the visitors can come in to visit clients who are living in the care home. So this is a landscaping plan showing how the site would look generally in terms of trees and landscaping. So as I said, there are internal gardens for the residents of the care home to enjoy, and for carers or for relatives to come and visit them. Sensory gardens, that sort of thing, which are usual with things like dementia care. There's an interface with the Middle Burgate site to the south, and that will be subject of new landscaping and new trees, which is the subject of a condition. There's further landscaping along the western boundary, and further landscaping as well along the eastern boundary with the national park. And also it's our desire to maintain the roadside hedgerow, which is an important feature. So you see the U-shaped building, you see the outbuildings and the air source heat pumps and the relationship with the neighbouring property and the car parking. Ground floor plan. So this shading, this yellowy shading represents all the bedrooms. They are generally single occupier in this type of scheme, so they are single occupant rooms. The rooms don't have any other facilities that you would normally get with an apartment or hotel rooms. They are just they are all with ensuite, but they are single bedrooms essentially. The blue areas are the communal areas, so there's lounges and dining rooms. There's even a cinema room on the first floor, and then the grey areas are more of the sort of staff accommodation, staff type uses. And then you've got stairwells as well, and you've got lifts to all the floors as well. So there's more bedrooms again on the first floor, so there's 70 bedrooms altogether. Then you've got the further communal areas. As I've said, there's the cinema room in that location there. And then on the top floor, there's a limited number of bedrooms, and there's some plant laundry facilities, kitchen facilities, and there will all be lifts and dumb waiters from the kitchen facilities down to the other floors. So it's very much based on the functioning of it, level access throughout it. But you notice that the top floor is not all accommodation. Most of it is, or part of it is roof as well. Now, I mentioned earlier on about the need to further the objectives of the National Park Authority in how we deal with this application. And one of the key difficulties with design of any building of this sort is that if you're not careful, you will get a very sort of institutional type building, which is a very flat faced facade with one single roof line or a large flat roofed area. And so officers entered into application discussions with this applicant, and I have to say the applicant has provided us with some very good treatments for the building. So internally it functions very well, but externally it looks like a selection of houses, more of a domestic scale. So most of this is two-storey with a little bit of accommodation sometimes in the roof. So the idea was to try and break it into different discrete elements to make it look as though it was a collection of buildings rather than one large homogeneous building, which could be quite bland in its appearance. That's the west and the south elevations and the previous one. So the entrance elevation is this one. So you've got the entrance facilities there, and then this is the elevation that faces the national park. So it's quite important as well to try and reduce the number of roof lights even, so that you have no significant impact on dark skies. So the number of roof lights has been limited throughout the scheme. And then this is the west elevation facing the open space and the Penny Farthing development. And this shows the south elevation, and there's an internal courtyard in this location. So you can have a flavour of how the building has been broken up. It's a very large building, but it has been kept down in terms of the height, and it has been designed so that it actually reflects more of the national park type vernacular. Some photographs of the site. So nothing much to see other than a big flat green open field. As I said, it has a very different appearance now to what it might have in 5 to 10 years' time when all this development does happen. So you're looking westwards towards the Penny Farthing development there. This is the existing access. And then there's some views showing the site in relation to the A338. It's quite a busy road, this, the A338, but there are pavements that run along this whole of this side of the road. The wheelwright's post, you can see the thatched roof there, the wheelwright's post, that's the objector's property, and then as I said, they have a number of outbuildings which are converted in the grounds. So these are some artist impressions of how the building might appear based on those elevation drawings. This is the access into the site. So this is the elevation facing the national park. So I hope you agree with me that in terms of the appearance, this doesn't give that sort of homogeneous sort of single roof or single architectural plane. So it is trying to sort of break the building into various elements. And then that's the view showing the internal courtyard and the sensory garden and the gardens associated with the care home. So the recommendation is one of approval. Before I go on to that, I'd just like to refer members to page 55 of their report. The key issues in this are set out on the first page there. I'm just running through them very briefly. The principle of development, there's clearly a need for new development, new housing development. There's also a need, and it's set out in the report in some detail, about the need for care homes, because our population in the New Forest is, as we're all knowing, getting older, and so there is a pressing need in terms of the Avon Valley and the waterside area for new care facilities. It's a former residential development. The applicants have shown that there is a need for this, and we have no objections to the development in terms of the principle. The site layout and the design and access we've talked about, in the way in which we've tried to improve the character of this type of building and its appearance, and the applicants have worked very hard with us to do that. Impact on designated landscapes we've talked about, both in terms of dark skies and also in terms of the need to protect the natural beauty of the national park. So we've tried to reflect that and be careful about how it relates to the national park. Access and car parking, highway safety and sustainable transport is all set out in the report. There are no objections from the Highway Authority in terms of access. There are some issues about car parking that has been raised by not by the Highway Authority, but by local objectors. But the situation with care provision and is different to apartment blocks, whereby you would get, with apartment blocks, you would get residents who had their own car. The opposite is true of care facilities like this. So there is less need for car parking. We've also had to balance the number of car parking spaces with the impact on adjoining properties and the impact on the national park and the way in which the site looks. And we are in a situation here where, yes, there is a shortfall in car parking, but we have a scheme that is filling a need, and we have to make a judgment in terms of the number of car parking spaces. And we have to, as well, understand the applicant's ability to reflect the needs for their site. And they are familiar with this type of facility, and they will know what car parking is required. Flood risk and drainage has been considered as well. The lead flood authority for Hampshire County Council have considered this in a lot of detail. It's gone back and forth a number of times, but they are now satisfied that the drainage scheme here, there is no flood risk associated with normal river flooding in this case. But there are surface water drainage issues in this area. So the local lead flood authority have been very careful to assess the impact on groundwater and the way in which their drainage strategy is going to set out the infiltration and set out attenuation crates, so that will slow the water so that there will be no impact either on the adjoining watercourse, and there would be no conservation impact either. So there's no flood risk concerns as far as we are concerned here. In terms of ecology and impact on sites designated for nature conservation, habitat mitigation payments would not normally apply to a case like this, because there is no recreational demand emanating from this site in the way that housing would have a recreational demand. So there's no issues there. There's no issues from your ecologist about on-site ecology. There are a number of protected species on site, and there's mitigation that's included within the conditions. There's also an off-site refugia to be set up as part of a 106 for slow worms, and that's part of the legal agreement. And biodiversity net gain is also catered for here, because whilst there is a shortfall, there's now a national scheme and there are local schemes where you can buy credits and you can offset any biodiversity net gain, any loss on the site, and you can increase that to the requisite 10%. In terms of environmental protection, we've had we've given consideration, I should say, to the impact of this development on any residents that live around the site, including the resident to the north, and including the impact on the care, on the holiday lets. And we've included things like acoustic fencing, and we've included conditions that were asked for by the Environmental Health Officer of the Council. So just to run back to the recommendation, and just then into the conditions briefly. The recommendation is set out on your papers on page 79 onwards. So the section 106 heads of terms would be essentially to set up the reptile refugia, to take an air quality monitoring contribution, Hampshire County Council's provisions for a full travel plan, and that requires the applicant to demonstrate how they can share transport to the site, use public transport, and encourage that type of sustainable travel, and with cycling as well. Section 278 agreement for the new junction and standard legal charges. So the recommendation on that basis is for approval. It is subject to any further comments that we might get from Natural England in terms of an appropriate assessment under the habitat regulations, but that has been sent off to them. We're not anticipating that they will object to the development, however. And then running very briefly into the conditions, they're set out on page 82 onwards. So we've got standard time limits, the approved plans, finished floor levels, materials, tree and hedgerow protection, detailed landscaping scheme, an archaeological condition as well, because there is the whole of Site 18 has got archaeological interest, so there's an archaeological investigation to take place. Construction traffic management plan is a key condition as well, along with the construction environmental management plan to manage the way traffic comes onto the site and goes off the site, and the wheels are washed, etc. The installation of a gateway as well to make sure that there's an opportunity for sustainable transport link later. Protection from road traffic noise for the residents who live in the care home, protection from noise from kitchens as well. Condition 12 refers to the noise from the air source heat pumps and the way in which that might have a nuisance to the adjoining property. So there will be a requirement to carry out a further study on that and to make sure that there is no adverse impact on the neighbouring property through that. Condition 13 talks about operational noise from delivery and restricts noise to deliveries, again to protect the amenity of the adjoining property. Number 14 talks about the noise and disturbance from car parking to the neighbouring property as well, and it talks about the potential for an acoustic fence there. 15 talks about a lighting strategy, and that deals with the dark skies issues, hours of construction on site, a construction environmental management plan, and a construction ecological management plan included as well. 19 is ecological enhancement, 20 is phosphate mitigation, and 21 is foul drainage, 22 deals with surface water, and 23 the removal of permitted development rights. So with that, Chairman, I'll leave it with you. The recommendation is one of approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, a very comprehensive report. Mrs. Rachel Lamb, planning agent, you have 3 minutes and you will be supported by Sam Roos if you have any questions. So 3 minutes.
Chairman, members, thank you very much for allowing me to speak this morning. My name is Rachel Lamb. I'm from Gillings Planning, the agent for Frontier Estates, the applicant in this case. We have a few short points we would like to make. The proposals seek to deliver care beds for local people in a sustainable location. This care home is proposed on the remaining part of a strategic allocation for residential-led mixed-use development. It is an optimal location for a care home, which will help to create a balanced community to the overall wider site and meet an identified local need and contribute towards housing need. The home will allow local people to remain where they have always lived, close to their family and friends, whilst also gaining access to the specialist care, help and support that they need, including end-of-life, nursing and specialist dementia care. This is a well-designed care home. The scale of the proposed care home is appropriate in relation to its surroundings, which include a 1, 2 and 2.5 storey building, designed with varying roof heights and materials to present a collection of buildings to the site. The applicant has worked closely with the Council's Urban Design Officer to achieve a sensitively designed building that takes cues from the adjoining approved residential schemes and existing dwellings in the area. Numerous pre-application discussions have developed a scale of building that sits comfortably in the site. The parking levels for the site are acceptable. As noted in your committee report, the Council's parking SPD confirms that schemes can be assessed on their individual merits. In the applicant's experience, 23 parking spaces will be more than sufficient. A transport statement also supports this view and further justifies the level of parking, concluding that even in peak hours, such as during shift changes, where there may be a higher number of staff on site for a short period of time, a sufficient number of spaces are provided. Travel plan measures will further improve this position. In addition, residents will not own cars, and sadly visitor numbers are typically low and can be accommodated. There is no significant noise impact. As members will note, suitable conditions are recommended to control and mitigate noise levels on the site, and these have been agreed by the Council's Environmental Protection Officer. As such, the overall control of noise remains within the influence of the Council. The applicant has significant experience dealing with such matters, and there is sufficient space to provide additional acoustic screening as set out in the conditions. All technical consultees support the scheme. The committee report notes that all technical consultees raised no objection, subject to conditions which are all agreed. The team has worked hard with officers at the Council to resolve any matters raised during the course of the application. The positive and proactive nature of these discussions has resulted in a better quality scheme that we commend to you and urge you to support. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. J. Harrison, you have 3 minutes. Would you like to?
My family live in the Wheelwrights Post. We're the only immediate neighbours to the application now and in the future. The dwellings in the other proposed developments nearby will, as you've seen, be considerably further away from the site. I recognise the need for care homes, and I initially wrote to the developers explaining my support, but seeking a meeting on site so that our needs as the nearest neighbour could be taken into account. They never met with me. Instead, they submitted plans that sought to incorporate a large section of our property into their plot, overlapping the clearly marked ancient boundary, by up to 6.22 metres and forcing me to commission a land surveyor and solicitors to defend my boundary. Yet I'm still not against the development. I only oppose the current plans. I have three main concerns. One relates to the impact on our property and my business. Two relate to the safety and aesthetics of the scheme for all. The site is roughly square. It has 4 equal boundaries, yet it's proposed that all the most polluting elements of the site, noise, light and fumes, be placed immediately next to the only boundary in close proximity to other dwellings. All of the car parking with the 24-hour movements associated with such a facility is planned along the boundary with the wheelwright's post. Parking bays are placed within 10 feet of the bed in one of our self-catering holiday cottages. The substation and heat pump units are all similarly placed immediately on the boundary with our property. I can see no justification for this. Mitigation measures could be put in place, but why make them necessary? The siting of the car parking also means that the proposal will be a visible blight on the area. The well-designed buildings, they're great, will be almost entirely concealed by the high hawthorn hedge standing on a metre-high banking. Nothing like the artist's impressions that you've been shown. The hedge is a minimum of 3 metres. It's currently about 4.5, and it's on a metre-high banking. All that will be seen is a substation and a car park running right to the rear of the property. Placing the car parking and the substation elsewhere on the site would dramatically improve the visual impact, making it much more in keeping with the rural and residential nature of this area. Finally, I'm deeply concerned about the safety implications of what I believe to be totally inadequate parking allowance. New Forest District Council recommendations would require 39 spaces, close to half of those planned 21. I believe the Council's recommendations, which are similar to those for this type of development run by most councils that I've looked at, and many stipulate more parking, surely they're for a purpose. Sadly, I can call on direct personal experience here. My father ended his days in a care home with 52 beds and 42 parking spaces, once again on a narrow A road. Fewer beds, twice as many spaces. It was often the case that no parking was available when we arrived. I've got 3 more words, especially at holiday times.
Members, who now go to questions then from the applicants or from officers. Councillor Dowd.
Thank you. Question for the officer, please. On the construction environment and management plan, there are a lot of important considerations there, but there isn't any consideration for parking during construction, on-site parking. As we know, developments of this scale often involve a lot of contractors and subcontractors, and they cause misery for the surrounding area when there isn't consideration for parking during construction. Is there a reason why there isn't any, a restriction on this, consideration of that?
Parking for construction is part of the construction traffic management plan. So you will see the construction traffic management plan condition 8, and that says, bottom of page 84, top of page 85, no development to commence until a construction traffic management plan to include details of provision to be made on site for contractors, parking, construction traffic access, space for turning and delivery within the confines, lorry routing to and from the site, wheel wash facilities, and a development programme of works submitted to and agreed, and vehicle cleaning measures for traffic leaving the site. So that's included in construction traffic management plan condition 8.
Right, but it's not clear enough to me that there is a requirement to park on site. That's my concern, because we have issues of similar scale developments where there isn't that condition, and it does cause problems for the surrounding community.
on every large site that we've dealt with, and I've dealt with for every strategic site in Fawley Bridge, but on all the strategic sites and all the larger developments, there's always a requirement for a construction traffic management plan. So the construction traffic management plan, the purpose of that is to actually make sure that in terms of highway safety and in terms of local amenities, the vehicles can get in and out of the site safely. They can turn around within the site. They're washed on the way out, because sometimes these sites can be dirty and muddy. But then if you read the last clause in the condition, it tells you that once you've agreed all those details, and it's in consultation with the highway authority, so when we get an application for the discharge of this condition, so before it says no development to permitted shall commence until they've submitted the construction traffic management plan. We consult with the highway authority because they are the experts in these matters. They will then give us their views and hopefully a green light on the details of the management plan. And then the last clause tells you that the development shall be implemented and carried out in accordance with the details approved. So if they start parking their contractors' vehicles on the public highway, they start failing to wash vehicles when they're leaving the site, so they leave mud on the public highway. If they start making changing the way in which the site is developed through that construction traffic management plan, then we can take enforcement action.
Councillor Woods.
I very much understand the concerns of the residents of the wheelwright post. Can I ask the officer, the acoustic fencing, how effective is it? And will it go right along the border?
Acoustic fencing is what it says on the tin. It's acoustic because it actually is not like your normal close-boarded fence. It actually is a fence that is there specifically to cut down noise. In this case, it will probably go along the whole of that car parking area and along the area where the air source heat pumps and the compound is. So my thoughts are on this, we haven't got the details of it yet, but my thoughts are that we have a fence that goes along the whole of that northern boundary. The fence will be designed such that it reduces any noise impact, and it will also remove any impact from headlights from cars. So as you drive into those parking spaces, the fence will actually prevent that from happening as well. So we've done as much as we can in terms of the layout of the site to try and reduce the impact on the adjoining properties with the acoustic fence. So there will be an acoustic fence. There is an element of landscaping along that northern boundary already. That landscaping is within the grounds of the objector's property, so it's their trees. So for instance, there's a large bank of conifer trees in this location, which shields the car parking from the objector's garden, which is in this location. So all those trees are within the objector's property and within the objector's control. So together with the acoustic fence, there should be significant safeguards in terms of the objector's property.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Councillor Hawkins.
Yes, the comment I'd like to make is fantastic. It's a comment. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. My initial reaction is looking at the configuration of this site. I'd have expected it to be rotated differently and the car parking at the back on the west face rather than where it is, so that you've got more of a visual impact from the main road. But we've just done a development at Marchwood 64, I think it was, with the appropriate parking, and my experience is we don't get many people visiting these care homes anyway. This instance, you seem to suggest that there's more of a situation with dementia patients and screen fencing to make sure they're safe. Is this car parking consistent with what we've done at Marchwood? I know that the numbers are limited because I can't see 23 parking spaces on there anyway at the moment, but is it consistent? I mean, are we following a plan, or does it change when you get dementia involved?
Well, I'm not checked the number of car parking spaces on the Marchwood site because each case is dealt with on its particular merits. So
I think about 16. I think
there were 16 spaces. So it obviously does appear to me to be consistent because that was, I believe, for 70 bed spaces as well. So there is that. I can't comment, and it's a question for the applicant in terms of the number of visitors they would get to this. I have no evidence to the contrary to what they said earlier in the debate about there being few visitors to the site, unfortunately. The fencing isn't intended to be a visual block. It's intended to be an open mesh type fence, and it's intended to keep the residents safe because unfortunately that's why the care home is set up with sensory gardens and their own sort of garden areas and areas to enjoy, to try and sort of improve the experience for those residents. But sadly it does have to be fenced. So I can only go by what the applicants are telling me in terms of their experience with running to similar establishments.
Are there any more questions? Then we'll go into debate. Councillor Hawkins.
I can make my comment. I'd like to thank the developers for putting in some green energy. Wow, it does my heart good. Somebody is thinking of the future. Thank you.
Does anybody else have anything to say? Councillor Woods.
Yeah, I noticed from the parish and town council comments that there's that the town councils do recommend this application because obviously a care home would be, I should think, very well used in Fordingbridge. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Frampton.
May I recommend the proposed recommendation on the paper, please?
Seconder. Councillor Hall. To the speakers, you have 1 minute to respond.
We've listened to the debate and thank you all for your comments and questions. I don't have a great deal to add. I would just reiterate that the proposals before you represent the result of a positive negotiation process with officers. The scheme will provide a variety of benefits in the locality, not least the delivery of much needed and high quality care beds. All technical matters have been resolved either through the provision of additional information or via agreed conditions.
Mr. Harrison, you have 1 minute.
I'd just like to say that nobody has adequately answered the question that one of the councillors asked, which is why isn't the parking along one of the other boundaries? The boundary to the west has an old railway line cutting area and is scrub land, and then a substantial space to any future developments, and would pose no environmental problems for any neighbours. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, the recommendation is delegated authority to be given to the service manager to take receipt of and have regard to any comments from Natural England in response to the council's appropriate assessment and the prior completion of an agreement pursuant to section 106 of the Town and Country Planning Act, and then to grant permission subject to the imposition of the conditions set out below. That has been proposed by Councillor Frampton and seconded by Councillor Sleep. All in favour, please raise your hands. And against? Abstain? 1 abstention. That has been granted. Thank you very much. Land rear of Waltons Avenue, Holbury, application number 24/10656. We do have 2 new members on the committee, so we'll go over stuff for them. But as you all remember, this was originally granted permission, but then they came back with a variation of conditions. And in that last meeting, we agreed that it should go back for discussion with the officers and So it was deferred and it's back with us again today for consideration. So we do have two speakers, Mr. Vass, the applicant, and Mr. Nicola Barnes, who is an objector. Did we have any, no, didn't have any interest on this one, did we? Oh, we did, yes, okay. We did have, okay. So we'll now go over to the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair. So just to quickly cover some of the updates, there was one additional letter in the update, but there has been an additional letter on top of that was received since that. So there have been two additional letters not covered in the report, one of which is concerned about compliance with the nationally defined space standards. I'll touch on that in a bit more detail when we're looking at some of the floor plans. And one of which is a reiteration of concerns about the location of refuse storage immediately on the boundary with one of the other properties. So that covered, we will launch into the presentation. So for those of you who haven't seen this site before, we are situated in Holbury. You can see there the main Walthams Avenue frontage is residential in nature, with the sort of long lane frontage providing a sort of main vehicle route through the surrounding area. So that's just to give you a bit of a wider context for the site that we're looking at. The site has historically just been sort of vacant, empty land, you can see there. Originally speaking, there was a dwelling that occupied what is now the access to the site. The dwelling has now been demolished and the building made good. We are proposing 8 dwellings on this plot, so they'll associated with the loss of that dwelling, there'll be a net gain of 7 dwellings being proposed as part of the application. You can see there the relationship with some of the surrounding sites. This site here has also recently been redeveloped as well, which we'll see in some of the site photos later on in the application. So just to touch base on the history of the site. So back in 2022, a planning application came in for the redevelopment of the plot. This was considered and subsequently granted by the planning committee. You can see there the layout. The current application is reasonably similar to that scheme, but as they were in the process of sort of setting out to build out the development, there were concerns about some rejigging that was required. So an application came in 2023. You can see here, this is the sort of form of development we're looking at, sort of detached and semi-detached gabled bungalows. So subsequent to this, an application came in 2023 to make some minor variations and alterations to the layout of the scheme. Just to give you a bit of a transition there between the two. So there's relatively minor rejigging. However, unfortunately, when the application was then being built out, there were again some issues and the scheme was not built out in accordance with the approved details. The key alteration is the change to the gaps between the dwellings. So there's a reduced gap between the dwellings. This means that the properties weren't able to facilitate refuse and cycle storage to the rear, which had previously been proposed. So this has now been pushed onto the frontage of the site. You can see here we've got some communal bin stores here and a communal bike store for the units here. This was as laid out at the previous committee. So this is the site plan as per the previous consideration in January. Since then, concerns were raised, particularly in relation to drainage at that planning committee, particularly in relation to this boundary running along here. So we've had some discussions over the last couple of months to try and clarify and dig down on those issues a little bit. And this is the current scheme that we've got in front of us. As you can see, it's quite similar in terms of its layout and form. The buildings themselves are unaffected. In terms of the landscaping, there was one parking space previously here, which has now been replaced by a raised planting bed, and this has been shifted to parking space now proposed over here. Other than that, the scheme remains predominantly as per the previous consideration. Additional information has been provided about the drainage and layout. All of the iterations of the applications included a permeable draining of this hard surfacing. One of the key issues that we were looking at as part of the drainage on the site was trying to make sure that we weren't worsening the existing situation, which is obviously the site as it was just open land. So when we're looking at things like hard surfacing or the additional roofs, that's what we're trying to mitigate. So the hard surfacing has all been designed to be permeable surfacing, which has a good quality of surface water drainage to avoid surface water runoff onto neighbouring properties. We're satisfied that the the details provided are adequate for the purposes proposed. The roofs of the buildings obviously also present additional hard surfacing, and a sustainable urban drainage system has been conditioned as part of both of the initial iterations on the application, and details have been provided as part of the current application that each unit will have the roof forms will drain into a sud system buried in the back garden to cope for any additional drainage from that. There is a bit of a continuing dispute between the neighbour here and the applicant about sort of land levels and how those have potentially impacted the development at the back here. In order to avoid and address any additional drainage that might be caused, the applicant has agreed to put in a drain that runs across these properties here. We'll just go into a bit more detail on some of the relationship on this boundary here and how that's going to propose to be worked. So you can see here, this is where the permeable paving edge is. So this is the permeable surface, and you can see we've got a sort of a block that prevents any sort of hard drainage across this barrier. So that helps to mitigate any potential impact on the hard surfaced section of the site. And then moving back towards the rear, this is an indicative bit that the applicant has put in, but the intention is that this will form as a sort of a hard stop to prevent additional drainage sort of surfacing across that boundary. And they propose to do that across the boundary with 22 and then also across the rear of the site to ensure that any additional drainage that is happening is dealt with within the boundary of the site and addresses the additional impacts of the development. So just going into a bit more detail about how the actual development has changed as a whole. I said I'd touch base on the sort of national space standards. Just for context, those are a nationally defined set of standards which seek to provide sort of quality internal amenity environments. The scheme as presented doesn't quite comply with those standards, although I should say the development is currently, with the reduction in gaps between dwellings, actually larger than the originally consented scheme in 2022. So although there is a shortfall below those standards, we are closer than we were when we originally consented the scheme. So this is, as you see, a very similar form of development to the originally consented developments. The original report goes into a bit more detail about the specific differences. We're, as I said, slightly larger, but otherwise the layout and form of the buildings is extremely similar to the previously consented schemes. So this is just to give you some idea of the elevations and appearance of the proposed refuse and cycle storage. There was some concern from neighbours about the potential sort of noise, impact, smells associated with this. As you can see, these are enclosed structures which will be providing storage for sort of larger enclosed bins. So we don't anticipate there being an issue in that regard. This is just to give a bit of context on the site. You can see here where that original dwelling was demolished and the access has been pushed through. This is a bit of context of the Walton Avenue street scene. And this is perhaps slightly outdated now, photos of the site during construction. This is the sort of the layout you can see here. This is that boundary there, and you can see the relationship and that sort of gravel strip and the concrete strip that acts as a barrier there along this boundary with 22. And this is just to show you the gap between the properties being retained. This is having a look at the rear of the gardens. You can see that additional development to the rear that's been consented and built out. So, for the reasons we've laid out, we think that the additional concerns raised in terms of drainage at the previous committee have been addressed by the applicant. We think there's sufficient information that can demonstrate that the scheme won't have an additional harmful impact over the previous sort of layout and use of the site. The scheme itself, as laid out previously, provides a valuable additional number of dwellings, and the differences to the scheme in terms of what was previously consented are considered to be relatively minor, so we are looking to recommend approval for the scheme in accordance with the conditions laid out. A number of the conditions have been amended since previously proposed. to match up with the currently submitted details and landscaping plans. Some of the conditions proposed as part of the previous 2 consented schemes are no longer necessary because the development now has obviously been substantially built out. So the retained conditions are the ones that we think are still necessary and relevant to the proposed development. I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Vass, the applicant, you have 3 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, apologies for not attending in January. I hope to be here, but over the last year or so, unfortunately, I've been in and out of the cancer ward at Southampton General Hospital, and the date that the January meeting fell on, unfortunately, I was in hospital at that point. Otherwise, I would have answered any questions that you had. Myself and my wife were a small development team that aspired to build social housing. We have limited resources, and we're by no means greedy developers. Throughout the development, we sought to work with the New Forest District Council social housing team, offering them 20% discount for market value. This is roughly £500,000 discount. But unfortunately, even with the discount, the social housing team couldn't raise the money via grants to acquire the properties. However, we're hopeful that these dwellings can still be used by local residents, as we have a house social housing association looking to acquire them for affordable rent purposes. So I guess people will be saying, how did we get to this point? Well, I've only got 3 minutes, so I'll be brief. It was a series of events, really, which weren't helped by illness and hospitalisation, which took me away from the site for long periods of time. Firstly, the builder we employed to build the bungalows built the footings and all but 2 walls in the wrong place. We subsequently asked him to leave and employed a new builder. We then discovered that the land registry boundary was different to the actual physical boundary and was in fact slightly smaller. We then sought the advice of our private building inspector, and he advised us to make the remaining bungalows slightly smaller. So the semi-detached bungalows are smaller than the granted planning permission. And he also advised us to reduce the gaps down the sideways. As he's the only constant official on site, we naively took his advice and carried on. But when we reached the point when the drains needed to be signed off, we found that the private building control company had actually gone bankrupt. This legally meant that the local authority, New Forest District Council, had to resume building control duties, by which point the bungalows were fully built. New Forest District Council Building Control asked us to uncover all of our work done previously, so everything from footings to block slabs to ceilings, roofs, everything, which we gladly did. And they've come around and inspected everything and concluded that the bungalows have been built correctly and to regulation. They did point out that the layout plan had changed, and this was when we had to talk to planning. We did this and have since worked hard alongside New Forest District Council's planning and building control teams to adapt our plans and adhere to the policies on bike and bin storage. We believe this plan meets all the local planning policies, and the planning team are in full support of this. I know people may assume that we were trying to gain some sort of advantage by building out plans that were different to the given permission, but it's just simply not the case. Reducing the size of the 4 dwellings on the end massively devalues the properties.
Mr. Vaz, can you please sum up? You have had.
Oh, sorry, apologies, sorry. So really, we've looked to address the neighbours' issues as well and tried to create a solution that works for everyone, which we think we've done. And ultimately, we've built 8 sustainable bungalows that are highly energy efficient. They have energy ratings of AA.
I do need to move on. Thank you very much.
But thank you.
Mr. Nicola Barnes, again, you have 3 minutes.
Yeah, good morning. Firstly, I'd like to say that we've approached the builder on the site a number of times to try and resolve this problem, and every time, unfortunately, he's basically turned around and said, "I do not wish to speak to you." I'm not saying that this was Mr. Barnes, it was his representative on the site. My problem has been that if you look through the photographs that we've sent, I don't know if you're allowed to do that, you can see that the ground level attached to my 35-metre boundary has raised by 300 mil. The bringing forward the French drain, that is lower than the ground level that he has on his side now. What is stopping the dirt and the earth falling from the higher level onto the lower level of the French drain? Is there going to be a concrete barrier between the two? Or earth, as we all know, does move. What is going to stop that drain from blocking up? If you look at the couple of pictures before that, you could see a picture that the gravel board, the garden on my side, and the ground level on his side by the pictures are level. If someone popped around, they could quite easily see from my photographs there is a 300 mil difference between the two. As I say, right at the beginning, I have tried to speak to these people, the site agent that is on the site, not Mr. Vance. Absolutely no trouble with Mr. Vance. We have tried to resolve this without coming this far. It could have been resolved so many times before. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you very much. Okay, questions, please. Councillor Davies.
So obviously I haven't been aware of this development or situation because I'm only new to the committee. I'd just like to query on the gaps between the houses. I've never seen gaps that small. I just wonder, did it ever occur to the applicant to build as terraced housing to make it more sensible? But that just looks a bit, I don't know, poorly designed. And I don't think that was intentional, but it does.
Can I answer? Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally agree. We had to work with what we had, hence why the gaps are smaller. I think terrace housing may have been, considered there, but probably not the right thing to do on the site. We've got various different sizes and types of housing there: 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom, semi-detached, detached. But yeah, it was as a result of the site having issues.
Thank you. Do we have any more questions? Councillor Riley.
Is there a solution here that, with the drainage off your site, that can keep this gentleman's property safe from flooding? As he said, you've got a drainage thing there. It can easily be filled with more. Is there anything you can do to stop that, please?
Yes, so if you take the front of the properties, sorry, John, if you can stay on that first slide. That's all permeable paving, so it's the best thing you can put down for stopping water runoff. So the water keeps on site, nothing leaves site, it collects all the water. So it's only really when you get to the rear gardens where there potentially could be an issue. Hence why we've put that drain in. We haven't quite finished yet, the site isn't finished. So we could dig that down lower if we need to. We can extend it. We can pretty much put a bigger drain in. We can drop the level of the garden slightly. So there are fixes that we have put in place and could potentially be improved if we need to.
Does that water go into the main sewer then? Or is where does that water go then?
So the water stays on site. That's the beauty of the permeable paving. So it puts no pressure on the local infrastructure whatsoever. So we could have easily tarmacked that and run a drain and run that water into the local infrastructure, but it doesn't. It stays all on site. So the whole hard standing is permeable. So it keeps all the water on site. So the water runoff risk is absolutely minimal.
Are there any more questions? In which case we'll go to debate. Does anybody else have anything to say? Councillor Dowd?
Yes, I mean, we appreciate it's not an ideal situation. I'm glad to see that our concerns about drainage have been addressed in some way. So it is an improvement on the original application, and I appreciate the time and effort that's gone into addressing those concerns. Thank you.
Does anybody else have anything to say? Councillor Hawkins?
I do not like this. I think it's cramped and contrived, and the spatial gaps are far too small. It reminds me of where you have batch hens, they all go in and all come out. It's not for humans. They shouldn't be living in those cramped conditions.
Councillor Sleep.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I appreciate the agent is actually here today to explain, because our first configuration regarding Councillor Davis's comments, there was access between each house to go through to the garden for storage for bins and everything else. But fait accompli suggested that in circumstances that seemed to develop, we were left with a situation where they were built and they're much closer together, and obviously the neighbours' concern was the reason we stopped it. But at the drainage now, I feel that seems to resolve the situation. And if the owner is looking to say, if we need to make it deeper, we can, as long as there's constructional thoughts between neighbours and the owners, then I don't see there's an issue with us now.
Councillor Davies.
I'm still very, and I appreciate Councillor Sleep's explanation, because I do think it's more cock up than conspiracy. But I just look at it and think, is that even in line with regulation? It doesn't look big enough to be in line with regulation. And obviously I worry that we're going to have issues further down the line when these developments are occupied, when these dwellings are occupied, with issues because of that small gap between the properties. Is that something that can be addressed?
Councillor Wade.
Yeah, well, clearly these properties have been built because we are where we are. Okay. Really, the best way forward, I think was intimated by Councillor Sleep, that there is a positive, constructive relationship between the developer and the neighbours to sort out the situation in the rear that may have happened in the rear gardens. You know, and I'm sure there's a bit of positive will. You can do something that's quite easy, cost-effective, and gets the job done. To the happiness of everybody. So I would like to propose we approve it based on the conditions of an ongoing, what's the word I'm looking for? An ongoing discussions and resolution of that potential problem in the back gardens.
I'm very sorry. That was proposed by Councillor Wade and seconded by Councillor Hartman. Does anybody else have anything more to say? In which case, we'll go back to the speakers. You have a minute each. So, Mr. Vash, you have a minute to respond.
Thank you. Yeah, I forgot to say these are all electric houses. There's no fossil fuels on site. They're wheelchair accessible. They meet needs that currently aren't available in the area. So I think that's all I'd like to say, really. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Barnes.
Thank you very much. Again, I just reiterate, if we can talk, it can be all resolved. Simple as that.
Okay, we'll go to the vote then. So the recommendation is to grant. That's been proposed by Councillor Wade and seconded by Councillor Hartman. All of those in favour, please raise your hands.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
Against?
1, 2, 3, 4.
That has been granted. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. We'll now move on to the next application, which is on page 129 of your agenda.
Three Ways Cottage, Rockbourne, application number 24/11008. And we have Nick Cobalt and Bell Cornwall Planning Consultants that will be speaking on this one. So we'll go to the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the verbal update, there is a correction to the background section of the report. The reference is made to Marsh Farm Cottage as a Grade 2 listed building, but this should read Coots Cottage, which is a Grade 2 listed building. Marsh Farm Cottage is not a listed building. There is also an additional plan included in the presentation today that wasn't published yesterday. This is not a new plan or an amended plan. It was just an accidental omission from the slides. This application is land to the rear of Three Ways Cottage. It comprises a stable building and the proposal is for a change of use to a residential dwelling. This is the red line plan. The proposal is in Rockbourne. This is the local context. The site is located outside of any defined settlement boundary and is within the open countryside and also within an area designated as the Cranbourne Chase National Landscape. The site is within Rockbourne Conservation Area and within close proximity to a Grade 2 listed building, Primrose Cottage. This slide shows the aerial imagery. The building is located to the west of Three Ways Cottage, which is here, which is in the applicant's ownership, and it's accessed from a single track, which is a private road serving Primrose Cottage here and Crook Cottage here. The building occupies a prominent position within the national landscape from the public right-of-way, which runs along the west of the site. This is the location plan showing the applicant's land ownership, including their residential property, the stable building and associated land, and a further land parcel to the west. This is the existing site plan. There is an existing access into the site with a gravelled area at the entrance and some hard standing around the building. This is the existing floor plan. The building is a 5-bay stables with a separate store. And these are the existing front and rear elevations for the stable. And these are the side elevations. These are the elevations for the existing store, which is detached, but attached with a panel of fencing here. And this is the proposed site plan. Shows the stable building and store to be retained, and the proposal would utilise the existing access here. There is an informal driveway here, sited to the north of the building with some hard standing. In terms of the principle of the development in the countryside, the proposal is contrary to policy which restricts development within the countryside unless it meets very specific criteria in both local and national planning policy. The proposal does not accord with any of these exception criteria as set out in the officer report. The proposed site area of the dwelling extends to 2,233 square metres, which is the curtilage for the proposal. This is a significant encroachment and domestication of the countryside. The spread of residential paraphernalia would result in an urban creep within the countryside and erode the tranquil rural nature to the detriment of the national landscape, and we consider the impacts of this to be contrary to policy. The Council has a duty to seek to further the statutory purposes of protected landscapes, including national landscapes. The Conservation Officer and the National Landscape Officer have both raised strong objections to the proposal on the basis of its impacts, and an in-principle objection is raised. The proposal would be contrary to policies SCR1, SCR2, SCR3, SCR4, DM20 and chapters 15 and 16 of the NPPF. And these are the proposed store elevations, so relatively light touch. These are the proposed front and rear elevations. The openings would be replaced with glazing, and although the shutters would be retained and could be closed, the likelihood would be that the shutters would remain open as these are the main light source to the dwelling. The glazing would change the character of the building, which the Conservation Officer considers would be harmful to the Rockbourne Conservation Area, and the National Landscape Officer also considers would be harmful to the national landscape. These are the proposed side elevations. And this is the additional floor plan that's been added to this presentation following the publication of the presentation yesterday. It has always been publicly available online, however, and is not a new or amended plan. The dwelling is proposed as a 2-bedroom dwelling with a detached utility and store and an open plan kitchen and living room with a shared bathroom which is accessed through a bedroom. The dwelling would be of a substandard size and it wouldn't meet the nationally described spatial standards for a 2-bedroom dwelling, so it would be a poor level of accommodation for its future occupiers, and this would be detrimental to their residential amenities, which is contrary to policy at ENV3. These are the site photographs showing the entrance to the private road from Rockbourne Road. This is Three Ways Cottage and this is Cruck Cottage, and both are Grade 2 listed buildings. This is the entrance to the site, and this is the view from further down the private road towards the site and from near the site down towards the road, and this is Primrose Cottage here. These are the site photographs and it shows the extent of the residential curtilage, which extends all the way to up here. These photographs show the building. It's in quite a poor state of disrepair. It's a single skin timber building and there are some holes and gaps in the cladding. Officers aren't satisfied that the building can be converted without major rebuilding. That would be tantamount to a new building within the countryside, which is contrary to policy. These photographs show the current use of this building for residential storage associated with Three Ways Cottage. The proposal is considered to result in an intrusive and unacceptable form of residential development in the countryside, with an extensive and excessive domestic curtilage which would erode the countryside where no exception tests have been met. The proposal has raised strong objections from the Council's Conservation Officer as well as the National Landscape Officer. We consider the proposal to be contrary to policies ENV1, ENV3, ENV4, STR1, STR2, STR3, STR4 of the Local Plan Part 1, policies DM1 and DM20 of the Local Plan Part 2, the Council's Residential Design Guide and Chapters 12, 15 and 16 of the NPPF. The proposal is therefore recommended for refusal for the reasons as set out in the officer report. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Nick Colbold, you have 3 minutes to present your case.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to start with what Mr. Barnes concluded with. If we could talk, things could be resolved. And I think this is the case here. There are so many issues which could have been resolved before this came in front of the committee. I'm going to focus on 2 of them. One is the residential land here, the question of whether it is residential at the moment and therefore the impact of the development. And the second one, the listed building, whether it's in the curtilage of a listed building, because that seems to be fundamental to the officer's conclusion. My view, unfortunately, is this recommendation to you on the principal matters here is legally flawed. We've got the question of residential land. The officers have questioned whether the land are in residential use. That's a big part of the officer's report. But this ignores the fact that the council has already judged that they are residential. You'll see from the planning history there's a 2023 certificate of lawfulness for the use of the stables as a residential annex. This was a proposed use, saying it didn't need planning permission. Could the council confirm this? The council confirmed that there would be no material change of use. This is verbatim from the report. For the use of the stables as a residential annex ancillary to the main residential use of Three Way Cottage. This land is already residential. It doesn't matter whether it's curtilage or not, it's residential. We've heard about the extent of the residential curtilage associated with the development, saying, well, this red line defines it. No, it doesn't. This red line defines the application site. This red line does not define residential curtilage. Then we got the question of the listed building, and you'll read from the report that there are issues of whether it is a curtilage listed building or not. Curtilage listed buildings, you will know, do not curtilage for listed buildings do not have to be the same as residential curtilage. They are different. And there are distinctive factors for you to judge on whether a building is a curtilage listed building. the main facts here. Was it there in 1948? No, it wasn't. Was it there at the time of listing of the main house? No, it wasn't. And therefore, is it listed on its own rights because it's connected to the listed building? No, it wasn't. No, it's not connected. It's quite clearly a separate building. So on this basis, the stables are categorically not Curtilage listed as well. I think that comes across wrongly in the officer's report. It leads to the justification for the reason for refusal, which says it's unacceptable residential use in the countryside. But up the road, up at Springbourne Farm, you've approved this committee in recent years, the conversion of the buildings up there to a residential use, using the need for housing as justification, using the fact that there are existing structures. They're in a far more prominent site than this, and yet here we are facing the fight against them and on their visual impact on conservation grounds, etc. Are we committed to delivering houses or not? I mean, that's ultimately the question here. This is a perfectly good building, capable of reusing in a residential area. Why shouldn't it be a separate residential use?
Thank you. Members, questions please to officers or Mr. Cobbold. Councillor Sleep.
Thank you, Chair. To the officer, could you go back to page 86 on your report there, the photograph? So we're looking at that central view stable building structure, and the daylight that I'm seeing is the back of the structure that's going to be... Okay, thank you.
Councillor Davis.
So I can't work out from the documents whether this is going to be a new family home or whether it's going to be an Airbnb or something like that, holiday let. I just wonder if the applicant could clarify that for me.
At this moment in time, it's not defined. The change of use to residential would allow it to be used as a family home, would allow it to be used as Airbnb. We've got the question which was raised by officer about the space standards, and that's where it could come into play, and you could control it if you wanted it to be something like an Airbnb to come around the space standards issue. But at this moment in time, it's presented as a separate dwelling, and that can be used as a separate dwelling in accordance with normal planning regulations.
Any more questions? In that case, we're going to debate. Councillor Frampton.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. You were aware I was on the National Park Authority for 8 years. I've never seen such a trial in my life, in all honesty. Giving something ancillary use does not give it independent residential use. So that is totally incorrect. This is not only a conservation area, it's the area of the... I did read it. Cranbourne Chase National Landscape. In a conservation area, you've got to bring something to the party. You've got to say you're actually enhancing the area. This is to try and convert a substandard stable block into residential. So I don't think it stands up anywhere in the Greenbelt, let alone a conservation area. And I'm going to go straight in with proposing the recommendation on the paper.
Thank you. Does anybody else have anything to say? Councillor Davies. Okay. Councillor Wade.
I must admit, I'm struggling with seeing the validity of this application because we've seen farm buildings converted to other things, but they tend to be quite, how can I put, not nuanced, but certainly different, shall we say. To me, this, I've agreed with a lot of what Councillor Frampton says in this. I just don't think this is the right sort of development we want in this area. It doesn't deliver, I don't think, for people who are going to use it in the future, if they were going to use it. And it certainly doesn't deliver for the enhance the area. So I agree with the rejection. I think the officers quoting a number of policies that no doubt are the actually bedrock for the rejection.
Thank you. Does anybody else have anything to say? In which case, I'll go back to the applicant. You have 1 minute to respond.
I'll respond to Councillor Frampton then. That's really all I've got to give.
Yeah, this application is for an independent residential use. I've never said, and we've never said, that it's got a current independent use. That's the whole point of this planning application, to give it an independent use. That's why it's here in front of you. You say we've got to bring something to the party in the conservation area. You said it's got to enhance the area. No, the legal test is to preserve or enhance. The way I look at it, these plans show that the building will barely alter. It will essentially look the same. It will therefore pass the test of preservation. Then what have you got in the green belt? I've written green belt here. It's not green belt, just to correct on that. We're going back to the conservation area test. Once you've tested against the preservation or enhancement, then you say, is there any harm? Is that substantial harm? Is that less than substantial harm? Do the benefits outweigh that harm? The benefit on the table here, going back to your independent residential use, is that residential use. So that comes into the consideration as well. Why is that? Why has this not been done? Why have we not had the opportunity to have these assessments made in the correct forum? Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll go to the vote then. So the recommendation is to refuse, and that's been proposed by Councillor Frampton and seconded by Councillor Davis. All of those in favour, please raise your hands. 10. And against? None. Abstain? 1. That has been refused. Thank you. While we're waiting for the next application to be set up, for those of you that didn't know, Woodbury 2 Vinnie Road, Lymington was withdrawn. Sorry, Viney Road was withdrawn.
Yes.
I thought, but the question's just been asked. Why didn't we have it? So obviously not everybody read. So. Okay, so now we go to the next application, which is on page 151 on the agenda, Walcott House, Blackfield Road, Fawley, and this is to grant advertisement. This is application 25/10058. Mr. Robert Elliott's here, the applicant, and Mr. and Mrs. Bailey, objectors, are also here. So first of all, we go to the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, councillors. This application is for Walcott House in Blackfield Road in Fawley. You can see here we have had some updates. There was an update sent round since writing the recommendation. A revised block plan was received just to show the position of the sign more accurately. The number of letters of support was increased from 6 to 10. The number of the letters of objection was then increased from 10 to 20. We've also had some letters from the applicant, a statement of support from the applicant, and a letter from the neighbour, Amiga, a further statement which I think would be read out later. We've also had an objection received from Councillor Alan Avery because of the effect on the neighbour. So that's the updates. This application is for advertisement consent, and therefore the only considerations are that of amenity and highway safety. You can see here the red line plan, which is quite clear. And in the local context, you can see it's a bed and breakfast establishment, and it's within the built-up area of Fawley. It covers from the road, Blackfield Road, is from Blackfield to Fawley, obviously, and it's close to the Fawley bypass, which you can see to the north of the site. It's a fairly narrow road with pedestrian footpath on one side, and it's in a residential area. You can see the position of the sign. Previously, there were two signs, one on either side of the boundary. The sign has been moved back slightly. It's now 1.7 metres from the boundary, which is shown on the plan here. Just to let you know that Highways, Hampshire County Council Highways were consulted on this application and they had no objection to the sign. The sign is 2.5 metres in height, it's double-sided, and as I said, it's 1.7 metres away from the boundary. Its reflective lettering is the reason why it needs advertisement consent, otherwise it would comply with the regulations for adverts within legislation. You can see here a bit more detail, and as I say, the lettering is white text on a blue background, which is reflective. It is retrospective, so you can see the sign in position here. It's adjacent to a property called Amiga, which is on the boundary. You can see more in detail here where the signage is located close to the boundary fence. Again, you can see it from both sides. Property, you can see where it's located. As I say, the previous sign was slightly further forward. This photograph shows a relationship with the property Amiga, because as it is reflective, there is concern from this neighbour concerning the impact on their outlook from the reflective nature of the sign. Here we can see in the dark, you can see there's some, there are street lights, but it is a very dark area. This is the sign when it's not being lit up by a car coming this way, but you can see the sign from the other side is reflecting the lights on the front of Walcott House. And again, you can see the difference at street scene at night. You can see it in the dark on the left-hand side, and on the right, you can see it's reflecting the lights from the cars. This is a fleeting illumination. It's not a constant. It's only when the cars are in a certain position. And again, you can see it lit up when the car lights hit it, but obviously that's only fleeting. We're recommending it to be granted with standard conditions. It's been brought to you to committee today because there was a contrary view from the parish council. Thank you.
Thank you. Was there interest? You got that? Okay, thank you. Mr. Rob Elliott, applicant, 3 minutes you have to speak. Thank you.
Good morning, councillors. My name is Robert Elliott, and with my wife we run the B&B known as Walcott House. It is a small but busy B&B with leisure and work-related guests from all over the UK and abroad. We enjoy this work, making it comfortable for our new and our returning guests. Thanks for giving me this opportunity to say a few words about my application for the advertisement sign and to clarify some of the issues raised. When we decided to update the forecourt at Walcott House, we had a conversation with our new neighbour about our intention to keep the sign roughly in the same position, in same size and wording, but we also indicated that we'll be turning the sign from a portrait to a landscape orientation. No concerns were raised at the time, and our neighbour recommended a local sign maker. When it came time to install the sign in its original position, close to the road, it became apparent that the visibility of the road would be difficult when exiting the car park. This highlighted a safety concern, which could be improved by adjusting the position of the sign by just 1 metre. We installed the sign as we didn't think that this would be a problem, because the old sign had been there for over 11 years and was in place when they moved in 20 months ago. We are very surprised by the response, and we are sorry for any upset. A number of our guests, without exception, have told us that they like the sign because it is visibly clearer, well presented, and all but one of our immediate neighbours have made similar comments. From all the objections that have been made, the visual impact has been the most contentious issue. I know that from the windows in Walcott House, the view of the sign is less prominent in its new position because we are viewing it from a larger angle and we have to move closer to the window to see the sign. I think that this must be the same as for our neighbour. This is best shown by the photographs in my supporting statement, which I provided earlier, which shows the position of the sign in respect to their windows, comparing the old sign and the new sign. By looking at these photos, I believe this will help you make the judgment of the line of sight and therefore the visual impact. I hope that this will enable you to support the conclusions and recommendations made by the case officer. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have a letter to be read on behalf of the objectors.
We formally object to retrospective application by Walcott House, a limited company. Our primary objection stems from an advertisement sign installed without authorisation directly up against our boundary. It is intrusively overlooks our property and spoils residential visual amenity, specifically visual intrusion and loss of amenity. The sign's size, design and materials are disproportionate to residential amenity and excessive for a small guest house. Its close proximity to our boundary results in a significant visual intrusion upon our home. The sign's presence creates an unwelcome and dominant feature, negatively impacting the peaceful enjoyment of our front garden and living spaces. Loss of privacy. The sign creates a sense of being constantly observed. The window nearest the sign is our bedroom. The sign is the first thing we see every morning and when lying in bed. It can also be seen from the second window, our lounge. We now close front blinds during the day, reducing light to our main living areas. It is also the first thing we see every time we open our front door. The sign text is highly reflective at night. Due to this, we have delayed installing our outdoor lighting. We would like to light up our driveway, but we do not want to illuminate the sign at the same time. These issues compromise privacy and diminishes the sense of seclusion we expect within our homes. Planning concerns. No planning permission first obtained. No verbal or written notice of design plan shown to us. The sign is in conflict with Fawley Parish Council guidelines, which are in place to protect residential visual amenity. For the above reasons, we respectfully request refusal of the sign, certainly in its present location up against our boundary and permanently overlooking our home, or indeed any advertising hoarding. Guest transit vans are bad enough, but at least temporary. Thank you for your time and consideration of our objection. Sincerely, Mr. and Mrs. Bailey, Omega, Blackfield Road, Fawley.
Okay, thank you. Questions then, please. Councillor Davies.
So I don't have an issue with the sign in principle. The only issue I think there is about reflective lettering at night. I think that's the only one that might be a consideration. Has the applicant considered redoing the sign without reflective lettering?
The reflective material used is retroflective, it's called, so it does reflect the light back to the source of the light. So if someone's driving in a car, then it'll be reflected so the driver can see it. It doesn't, it reduces the impact on the neighbours and other areas. At the moment, we prefer, because it is a slightly dark area, it does improve the visibility for drivers looking for the guest house.
Thank you. I'll get used to it. Could the lettering be traced over effectively with non-reflective material as a compromise?
Shall I answer that one? I mean, basically, we're dealing with the application that we've got in front of us at this current time. I mean, if it was refused, then, you know, ultimately, then the applicant can come into discussions. The only reason it needs consent is because it's reflective, it's classed as illuminated. Other than that, in terms of its size, scale, position, it doesn't need advertisement consent.
Councillor Wade.
I've got a question really. I'm quite intrigued why you put the sign there next to the bungalow, because Fawley Road is it? Yeah, Blackfield Road, sorry, goes on to the main road, doesn't it? And you'd think that you'd put it on the other side of the property because that's where most of the traffic would come off the main road in to visit your establishment. But you put it on the other side, which is upset. So could you just move it to the other side, or alter the angle a bit instead of it straight on? You could have it angled slightly. Then people coming off the main road would see it. Far more traffic must come that way than come up the way from Blackfield.
I think there's an even amount of traffic going both ways. It's quite busy at times. The sign on the other side is very close to the bend, and as if you can see from that photograph, it's quite a sharp bend, and it's relatively narrow. So most of the vehicles, when they come around, are looking to negotiate the bend safely rather than be looking for a sign. It's only when they get on the straight part that they see the sign.
Councillor Sleep.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask the owner, the fence panels have been changed from the before and after shots that I looked at recently on the positions. Can I ask, are they Omega fence panels or are they your fence panels?
They are Omega fence panels.
And they seem to be actually bigger now than they were on the original
They've
line.
extended it lengthwise and the height.
So their access into their property, they're blind as they come out now because of the height of the panels. They can't see over them to drive out, can they? Their car
I
height
agree,
and the
yes, and
panel
the
height, yeah. Okay.
Any more questions? Debate? Councillor Dowd?
Yes, I understand the need to advertise and signpost the business. I'm not in favour of reflective signs in a residential area. I think that's better suited to an urban and town environment than residential. So I do feel that that's the wrong kind of sign for that area. Thank you.
Councillor Frampton?
Madam Chairman, I must admit that looking at those photographs of the cars, it can be quite striking, and if that gives the sort of the effect into the bedroom that it's coming back at the car, it could be quite annoying. I certainly think that the sign there is not a problem, but I have a problem with it being reflective as well, and I'm actually going to propose that we don't give permission because it is reflective in the area and it could cause detriment to the amenities of the neighbour.
Chairman, clearly the way forward is for the owner of the sign to have a less intrusive sign to advertise his business, perhaps located slightly differently on the site, then it's a win-win rather than have something that clearly has a negative effect on his neighbour.
Councillor Hartman?
Yeah, I do drive past the sign every day. It doesn't stick out as bad as the pictures make it look. I think it's just the location of the sign, to be honest. That's the main issue. Thanks.
Councillor Davies?
I don't have an issue with the location. I think actually, to be fair, it has to be advertised. My issue is just with the reflective lighting, that's it. And I think, or not reflective lighting, reflective lettering. So I think I'd be happy to refuse on the proviso that we'd like them to come back with to come back not to us, but to the officers with something that's less intrusive.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My view is the sign's been there a long time. It's reflective now, and if I was staying there, I'd be very grateful that I could see it at night when I was looking for it. Thank you.
Thank you. So reasons for refusal then?
The reason for refusal is that the reflective nature would have a detrimental effect to the amenity of the immediate neighbour and could be intrusive into their light into their main bedroom. And can I just, am I right in assuming that if it was non-reflective, the gentleman doesn't have to come back to us? He can just put up a non-reflective one without asking.
If there's nothing more to be said, I'll go back to the applicant. Then you have 1 minute to respond to that. Okay.
Thank you. As I mentioned, the reflection doesn't go into the neighbouring area, because it reflects the light back to with the source. So it doesn't impact as much as you would suggest. And the reflective nature of the material is the lowest of all reflectivity of any road signs. So it's an RA2, RA1, which is only used for information sort of signs, not for traffic signs. So it is a very low reflectivity anyway.
Mrs.
Chairman, thank you. Morning, members. I just want to make sure, before you take your vote on the reason for refusal, I noted down that it's the reflective nature of the sign, and that reflective nature has a detrimental effect on the neighbouring amenity, impacting on the amenity specifically of their bedroom by virtue of the light reflection. Fine, understand all that. Can you help me with a policy to hook that on, please?
Is it not one of our policies that if a fixed structure is detrimental to the amenities of the area, that's one of our policies?
Yeah, you have policies, absolutely. And I think you're all aware you need to be able to substantiate your reasons for refusal with a policy basis. So I thought I'd just ask you what that's going to be. To try and help you and give you a steer, ENV3 of your local plan is probably the most pertinent of those policies, but I just need to make sure that I have your agreement that we use that. Specifically, ENV3 talks about avoiding unacceptable effects by reason of visual intrusion, overbearing impacts, overlooking, shading, noise, light pollution, or other impacts on local character or residential amenity. So that would probably give you the hook you need.
Thank you. I was going to get round to that. Yes, thank you. Thank you for your learned help.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I've got the reason there.
Okay, thank you. Right, so we'll go back then to the proposal to refuse by Councillor Frampton, seconded by Councillor Dowd. All of those in favour, please raise your hands. Against? 2 and 1 abstention. 8, 2, 1 abstention. Okay. So that has been refused. Thank you. Right. That's a hard one, that one. Because they actually had planted shrubs, which presumably if they grow up taller.
Let's change the left. Yeah, the sign that was there before was a painted timber sign.
Yeah.
Just change the left sign.
Yeah,
it's got deemed approval, deemed consent.
Okay. Are you ready? Okay. Right, next application is on page 157 of your agenda. Site of 41 and 43 Manor Road, Ringwood. Application 24/10919. We have 2 speakers, a planning consultancy and Mr. Gareth de Booz from Ringwood Town Council. So we'll go to Vivian Baxter, please, for the presentation. Thank you.
Sorry. Good afternoon, members. This application for 41 and 43 Manor Road has been primarily submitted to try and address concerns raised when the previous application was refused and subsequently dismissed on appeal. The site area hasn't changed in this respect, and it still outlines the extent of the garden areas for those 2 properties. Here we can see the local context. It's in a residential area of Ringwood, relatively close to the school and leisure centre facilities, and you can see the A31 just to the north of the site there. So looking at the aerial photograph, the site outlined in red shows the existing pair of semi-detached houses which have gable ends, as does the adjoining pair of semi-detached houses, but I'm just pointing out that just to the south of those, there are 2 pairs of semis which have fully hipped roofs, which is very similar to the scheme that's in front of you. So here we have the proposed block plan on the left-hand side. You can just about make out the purple dotted line of the existing properties and a blue dotted line which shows the previous scheme. And here you can see that the southernmost block has been moved away from the boundary quite a distance, and we have got a greater gap in between the 2 pairs of semi-detached houses, and that was one of the main issues raised in my previous report and the inspector's decision as well. And just to show the previous scheme on the right-hand side there, where you've only got pedestrian access between the 2 properties here and at the south of the site as well. So that the floor plans and elevations of plots 1 and 2, I've put up the previous submission as well. So one of the concerns raised previously and agreed by the inspector was that the design of the dwellings didn't fit in with the style of the dwellings in the rest of the estate in Manor Road. To the north of the site, the context is slightly different and there are older properties, and the previous scheme, as you can see here, had sash-style windows in the front, and it had quite a long ridge too. The amended plans that we have before us have got side-hung casement windows which reflect the character of the dwellings that are already in the relevant part of Manor Road. And we have a shorter ridge, which I think improves the appearance of that front elevation too. And here again, we've got the side-hung casement windows and a relatively short ridge for that pair of semis. And an indication of how this would appear in the street scene. You've got reasonably spaced gaps between the proposed pairs and also the single-storey element of the house next door to the south. So this is what the site looks like at the moment. You've got quite a mature hedge on the corner of Manor Road and Green Lane to the left-hand side there. Number 43 is now boarded up. It's been empty for a long, long time, and it's in quite a poor state of repair at present. To the rear, you can see the relationship between the existing properties and the bungalow that was built in the garden of number 41. So you can see that it's got a close boarded fence along its side boundary. The right-hand photograph shows the rear boundary to that bungalow and the shed which is in its rear garden, which helps to protect its amenity from the windows that are currently in situ in the existing properties. This is a photograph I took during the consideration of the previous application when access was possible into the rear garden, just to show you the properties that are in Parsonage Barn Lane. This is an outbuilding which would be demolished as part of the proposals, and you can also see the corner of the bungalow to the rear, just on the left-hand side there, with its adjoining bungalow at the end of the garden there. And just in relation to comments that have been raised about the amount of parking. Parking in the previous scheme and the inspector's decision was considered to be an issue because it was all at the front of the property. The site layout for this scheme does include parking spaces to the front of plot 1, which would be in this corner. However, this is an approved layout for the bungalow that was built at the back, and you can see that we previously agreed 2 parking spaces, which could be implemented without any further permissions as it stands at the moment. So that's just to deal with that issue. Other properties have got the parking which can be provided at the side of the dwellings. So the proposal does include elevation alterations to address concerns made by the inspector in dismissing the previous appeal. The pairs of houses have a greater spacing between them and also the adjacent pair of semis, and that enables parking to be provided both on plot and to the side of houses where possible. We've now been able to secure habitat mitigation and air quality monitoring, which was a previous issue raised before, and we're now recommending permission for this scheme. Thank you. Although I should point out I didn't do the updates, sorry, I always do this. I will just do the updates. The agent has requested an amendment to the proposed wording of condition 12, which reads, no development or vegetation clearance shall take place between March the 1st to August 31st inclusive. Now, I've discussed that with the ecologist, and we have agreed that the condition can read, no vegetation clearance or demolition shall take place between March 1st to August 31st inclusive. This enables development to take place, because the original wording was pretty restricted, the actual development being taking place between March and August. So the important bits are restricted during the relevant bird breeding season. And a verbal update I have for you on page 169 of your reports. 5 paragraphs up from the bottom, the last sentence reads, in the absence of a completed legal agreement, the presumption in favour of sustainable development does not apply in this instance. We have got Section 106 agreed for this scheme, and therefore the presumption in favour of sustainable development does apply in this instance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Darrell Howells, you have 3 minutes, please, to put your case.
Good afternoon, members. My name is Darrell Howells of my own planning consultancy, and I'm here to speak on behalf of the applicant in support of the proposal. Firstly, please may I thank your senior planning officer for carrying out a detailed assessment of the planning application against the adopted planning policies, and of course the planning inspector's decision notice, which is clearly relevant. As you've heard, the principle of the development or the redevelopment of the site for 4 houses is wholly acceptable with policy terms, as the scheme will provide 2 and 3 bedroom houses to meet a particular need. The revised site plan is materially different from the previous scheme which was before the inspector. We have removed the large expanse of hard standing from the frontage and introduced greater areas of soft landscaping in its place. The car parking arrangement is now clear in terms of space allocation, which was a criticism from the inspector on the first scheme, as it was unclear and to a point contrived. The position of the southerly house, unit number 4, adjacent to number 45, is now further away from the southern boundary than dismissed by the inspector. Previously, the separation was 1.5 metres. It is now nearer 3 metres, and consequently, the gap between the buildings of number 45 and unit number 4 is 5.4 metres at ground level and 9.6 at the first floor. The spacing between the proposed pairs of houses has also been increased from 2 metres to nearly 6 metres. So overall, the scheme supports the prevailing pattern of development. Alterations have also been made to the elevational treatment of the houses. At the request of your planning officer, we have reduced the number of windows and changed their casement style so they are now in keeping with the area. Each dwelling will benefit from a private rear garden which is appropriate to the size of each dwelling, namely 2 bedroom houses enjoy 76 square metres of amenity and the 3 bedroom houses at 135. As you've heard, no overlooking or no harmful overlooking to neighbouring properties will occur, and therefore the privacy to neighbours is preserved. Overall, I wholly agree with the assessment and the conclusion of your senior planning officer that the proposed development does indeed now accord with adopted planning policies and overcomes the concerns of the inspector, and I would ask you to support the recommendation to approve, please.
Thank you very much. Okay. Councillor de Boos, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. The Town Council did have some problems with this application, hence it was R2'd, not R4'd, but R2'd. One was that it wasn't in accord with nationally described space standards. The more important one, I think, is that there was no evidence documentation regarding Development Plan Policy R10. The officer report refers to the NPPF paragraph 11D, which makes a presumption to approve if the development plans are out of date. Development Plan Policy R10 is not out of date. It was adopted last year. There is absolutely no valid reason why the required R10 evidence documentation has not been provided. The applicant is speculating about energy performance. To be clear, R10 requires a predicted SAP assessment to be carried out, which has to be done later anyway in accord with building regulations. R10 needs it to be carried out before planning permission is given. If the prediction is that the build will not achieve the required standard, Provision of photovoltaic panels, for example, would be expected to address the shortfall. So, in summary, the current application is not policy compliant. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. So members, questions, please. Councillor Davies.
Just a question for Councillor Debus on R10. Could you just explain a bit more for those unfamiliar with the policy, like myself?
What would you like me to explain?
In terms of the context, could you just go through it again in terms of what R10 is, what it says, and what the actual...
Okay, so R10, it came from the Ringwood Neighbourhood Plan. And I'm not going to read it all to you, Jack. I mean, it's but basically what it's looking to do is to address a problem that we have within Ringwood Parish, where the energy efficiency of the buildings that we have in Ringwood Parish is worse than the energy efficiency of buildings in the district, which itself is worse than energy efficiency of buildings in the area, like the South England area, which itself is worse than the energy efficiency in England as a whole. So Ringwood Parish has very poor energy efficiency in its buildings. So to address that, we wanted new builds to be as highly energy efficient as possible. We looked at passive housing. The problem with that is that that puts undue expense on the builder to build it. So rather than doing that, we've required that a SAP assessment is done, which has to be done anyway for EPC, but it's predicted at the beginning. And if the prediction hits the target, then we're happy. If it isn't, then something needs to be done to address that difference. That's what R10's about. Does that help? Okay.
Just to comment on that quickly with regard to the space standards that the Town Council made reference to in their initial objection to this scheme. They were particularly concerned about the size of bedroom 3 in, I think, plots 3 and 4. This bedroom measures 7.5 square metres, and having checked the national space standards, a single bedroom where an adult could sleep has to be at least 6.51 square metres, and a smaller room is possible if it's for a child. So the bedroom that the Town Council were concerned about complies fully with the national space standards. Moving on to policy R10, page 166 of my report has a section entitled Climate Change, which clearly states that the applicant has submitted a climate change statement to support their application. They detail the materials that they're proposing to use will be from local sources. They have stated that the development will incorporate appropriate renewable and low carbon energy resources. The construction will use energy efficient insulation, double glazed windows, A-rated appliances, light bulbs and efficient boiler systems. So as far as we're concerned, we feel that the application does comply with policy R10. Thank you.
Thank you. Did you have your hand up?
So, yeah, my question was actually to Officer was, hasn't it been covered in the report? And yeah, yes, it has. Thank you.
Any more questions? Councillor Sleep.
Could I ask the officer to go back to the shot which shows south of that next property, number 45, is it? And you pointed out the roof lines of those other buildings. So basically that block in there that's a gable ended that's left in the middle, there was 2 lots. We're getting rid of the top one. It's just going to be a middle section and we've got a similar design reflected the other side of it. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Any more questions? Go to debate. Councillor Sleep.
Sorry, David. But I certainly do like the new design that's accepted, and I think they're really good, and I would like to propose that we accept them.
Does anybody else have anything to say? In which case I'll go back to Councillor Debuse. Oh, sorry, first of all, I'll come to the agent. You have 1 minute to respond. Councillor Debuse, 1 minute.
Yeah, I know I'm not allowed to ask questions, but the document referred to by the officer is not, to my knowledge, on the portal. So I don't think we've seen it. But if it's there and it does address the concerns bar 10, great.
Okay, we'll go to the recommendation, which is to grant subject to conditions proposed by Councillor Sleep, seconded by Councillor Frampton. All in favour, please raise your hands.
5, 6, 7, 8, 10.
And against?
1.
1. Okay, next application is on page 175 of the agenda. Vicarage Moor Cottage, The Common, Southend, Dameron. Application number 24/11007. We have 2 statements to be read on this one, but first of all, we'll go to Kate we didn't have interest, did we? No. We'll go to Kate Cattermole for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, councillors. Right, so the application before you today is Vicarage Moor Cottage at the Common, Southend, Dameron. The application red line is here, as you can see. So it's to the southern part of the central core of Dameron, in quite a rural part. As you can see, there's not many properties along the road, so it's a long, narrow road. The proposal in front of you, or I should have said, is for a detached outbuilding. And the reason it's come to committee today is we have a recommendation of refusal from Dameron Parish Council. So this is just the local context. So as you can see, it's a rural settlement, quite sparsely populated. We've got a lot of water. You've got the river and there's a pond to the north of the site. I put this slide in just for your information. So the site does fall within the national landscape of the Cranbourne Chase. It is, there is a flood zone which just cuts across part of the garden of the site. The conservation area is to the north. I just put that on just so there wasn't any confusion about whether it fell within a conservation area. So the answer is no, it doesn't. So this is the site. As you can see, it's quite a long frontage. The dwelling is here, and the front elevation faces across the site. So the reason it requires planning permission is the outbuilding will be sited forward of the principal elevation. So this is where the outbuilding is going to be. As you can see, so it's to the western side of the site. And this is the building. It's a very modest single-storey outbuilding. It's 2.8 metres in height. We did accept amended plans which show incorporated a green sedum roof and also introduces a French drain, which you can see on this plan here. That was in response to the concerns about drainage on the site. And this is a street scene. So as you can see, it's going to be quite screened from the road by the existing hedge, and it is set away from the boundary. Just to show you the photographs. So fortunately, I happened to go on a very wet day and did my site visits. I think there were vehicles getting caught in floods and all sorts, so it was extremely wet. As you can see, there is some water lying on the road. As you will see from the report and the neighbours' objection, there were concerns about flooding. This seems to be an ongoing problem. The outbuilding will be set away from the road. As you can see from this photo on the right, the land slopes down away from the road, and with the French drain, any water will be directed down to the pond, which is adjacent. This is a watercourse here. And this is a view from the road, and this is Marshgate Cottage. And then this is just looking towards the site where the proposed outbuilding is going to be. Now, with regards to impact on the national landscape, as you will see from the report, we felt it was a modest building and there's no, with very limited fenestration. The function of the building is proportionate. Due to the layout of the plot, it's not unreasonable to have an outbuilding in this location, which is purely for the use of the neighbours. The recommendation is grant subject to conditions. Thank you.
Thank you. We have two letters to be read, one from Mrs. Snowden Darling, who is the applicant, and then one from Mrs. Felicity Robinson, who's an objector. So we'll have the one from the applicant first, please. Thank you.
The garden room for Vicarage Moor Cottage is important to me. Due to a degenerative hip issue, I have specialist equipment that is too tall to go into the house or existing annex. This equipment is required to ensure good mobility. Whilst being relatively new to the area, I hunted for my dream home for 2 years before finally purchasing Vicarage Moor Cottage. I moved here for the connection to nature and the peace and quiet, and I am committed to preserving this. I carefully chose the location applied for so that the garden room would not be visible from inside my house, from the surrounding houses, or from the road, as it would be shrouded by the hedge, therefore ensuring it would be visually in keeping with the area. Having moved from a very high flood risk area, I am very aware of the concerns of being near water and having a consideration from runoff drainage. So I carefully checked to make sure it would be distance from obvious water runoff area that goes through my garden, so it wouldn't cause issue to my neighbours or the road. This was along with ensuring that part of the plan will include extra drainage around the structure itself. I was very distressed that these points weren't noted in my original application. I very much hope that the amended plans from the architect abate your concerns and you grant me permission for this structure. I'm just going to reset the speaking time for the other one, so just bear with me. So this is the objection from Felicity Robinson. The common, which comprises part of the Cranbourne Chase National Landscape, was formerly all marshland with 2 or 3 small thatched cottages. It is designed as the marsh on the OS maps, indeed my cottage near Marshgate. The plan is for the proposed garden room gym to sit directly in front of my cottage on land which slopes down from the much higher farmland. This is the route for runoff from Ashridge and the fields down to the tributary of the River Allen. The water in the field above gathers into a sizable area, and during heavy rainfall it flows over through the steep banks behind and on either side of my cottage down the stream, just below the proposed site. This problem is exacerbated here as my cottage and this area of Vicarage Moor Garden is at the lowest point in the common, and there is a pinch point where the tributary runs between the high banks of the man-made lake and the lane down at which this point the river flows from both directions. The restriction on the building in the national landscape has not only protected the wildlife and beauty of the marshland and the limited excessive construction, but also helped to prevent flooding. Vicarage Moor Cottage was developed and extended with paving around it and a detached garage very close to and divided from the lane by a long brick wall. This is the part of the site which is level with the surrounding landscape. Further development. In time, the garage has become the studio office, and to compensate, its adjoining car parking had been recently extended alongside the lane by about a third. 2 metres of hedging was subsequently removed to widen access. This has created a continuous line of construction parallel to the lane, and anything further on the more steeply sloping land alongside the lane is an effective dam to drainage and a large volume of water. I had welcomed revised plans to build French drains around the sunroom, but the commencement of construction this week of 4 to 5 foot high breeze block and brick foundations and walls over a large area of the waterlogged site in question is of further concern. As the foundations were dug, they immediately filled with groundwater during a period of continuous dry weather. From the opposite direction, a path was built between the hedge line and the stream inside the garden of Vicarage Moor. It extends from the deep bend along the length of the lane to this area of lawn where a garden pond has been filled. Whilst the path is porous, such as is the volume of water from the higher land, that the highways drain is effectively dammed, and as much floodwater flows over the top of the road as below it and over and through verges in front of my cottage. To build further on this waterlogged area would complete the already serious damming effects which an existing road drain...
We're well over the 3 minutes, but I think we get the picture anyway, so...
Okay.
We'll come to questions then, please. Councillor Davies.
I accept obviously the officer recommendation, but I look at it and I look at the design and I look at the environment. I do wonder if it actually is in keeping with the environment. Obviously, you've got a kind of rural character of thatched housing. I don't know. I look at the designs and yes, and I'm just wondering, is it actually in keeping? I mean, ENV3 surely gives flexibility to go both ways on that. I personally would probably err on the side of saying it isn't in keeping. Could it go both ways? I've literally just asked, could it be interpreted both ways?
Certainly, as I said previously, obviously we have to look at the application as submitted. The view was that green sedum roof, timber cladding, it's a modest building. Obviously you could say that's a bit of a subjective view, as to what you think, but I did not have any issues with the actual, because of the scale of it and the materials, I didn't think it would be inappropriate in this location. Hopefully that answers it.
Sorry, could I just come back on that? In terms, not so much the sedum, in terms of the doors, the windows, the glass, is that something that would be in keeping?
Well, it's a modern outbuilding, obviously fit for purpose. The fenestration is on the north elevation, which faces down the garden, so it's not, highly visible. And with the screening from the hedge as well, as I said, obviously, if you feel differently, that's fine. But it didn't raise any concerns, in my opinion. Thank you.
Frampton.
Yeah, question of officer. I probably missed why, and I can't say it. Why isn't this permitted development?
It's forward of the principal elevation of the dwelling. Just to show you on the plan, this is the principal elevation. So this is forward. That's why it requires consent. Thank you.
Was it Councillor Dowd?
We are only just considering this development, nothing else on the site. It is just the outbuilding. Thank you.
Now, Councillor Davies.
Thank you. It was just to ask. I've completely forgotten now what I was going to say. You've completely taken. I had another question. Yes, sorry, no, I've got it. Are there any examples of a similar outbuilding in the parish of Dameron?
Potentially there could be. Unfortunately, I haven't got that information to hand, so I can't assist you with that. I have dealt with quite a number of applications in Dagenham over the years, and we have got outbuildings, so I wouldn't like to say there aren't. But I'm not, as I said, I can't recall any off the top of my head. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions? Debate? Councillor Frampton?
Propose a recommendation on the paper.
Councillor Wade?
I was just going to do the very same. I don't have any problem with this. It is a modest building and it's not going to have any detrimental effect to the environment, the countryside. The developers even take into account the drainage issue.
So are you seconding it then? Yes. Okay, thank you. And who else had their hand up? Councillor Dowd?
It's basically no more intrusive than a garden shed. I thoroughly approve of the green roof, so I'm very happy to support the recommendation.
Thank you very much. Then in that case, we go to the vote, which is...
Just to make a statement that the drainage issues, I'm quite pleased that the foundation's filled up, because now the French drain is going to take that away anyway, so I can't see the fact that it's going to be there is actually a bonus on the site, so I'm pleased to hear that.
Okay, right, vote. So it's recommended to grant, subject to conditions, and that's been proposed by Councillor Frampton and seconded by Councillor Wade. All in favour, please raise your hands. And that is unanimous, so that's been granted. Now come to the tree preservation order. Councillor Hawkins, you're staying in the room, are you? But you're not going to speak? No. Okay, fine. Thank you. Right. Okay. Well, can we then pass over then for the presentation on this one? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chairman. Good afternoon, members, any public attendees. We have Tree Preservation Order 0008/24, land at 6 Albert Road, New Milton. Currently a provisional order before the Planning Committee today for a decision on whether to confirm the order. The order was made in response to a request from the tree owners to the authority to consider protection of their tree. The tree is a mature sycamore located to the rear of the subject property near to the eastern boundary. The owners are concerned over pressure from their neighbours to have it cut down. This is the location of the site concerned. It's on the western side of New Milton, just south of the railway line. That's the sort of local TPOs in the vicinity of the tree. See the trees to the end of the rear garden there. Here's the aerial view. Tree situated to the back garden. You can see the canopy of the tree there. This is the order that was served. In response to the request, a site visit was undertaken to assess the tree and its amenity value. The assessment considers the overall condition, quality of the tree, its value as a public amenity, and whether an order would be deemed expedient. In order to satisfy the public amenity requirement, the tree, or at least part of it, should be visible from a road or footpath. In addition, its individual, collective and wider impact needs to be considered. This includes its overall size and form, future potential as an amenity, and its contribution to and relationship with the landscape. I'll just take you through a series of the public amenity street scene photographs. You can see the image to the left is from Albert Road, where you can see the canopy of the tree between the houses there. On the right-hand side, it's a view from Hobart Road from a distance. Views from Gore Road and the approach to Vincent Road. So it's clearly visible from public viewpoints. can be seen from multiple vantage points. Its overall size means it does have wider impact where it provides a positive contribution as a backdrop feature in the built landscape and the residential development. Other contributory factors to consider when making an order are importance to nature conservation and or response to climate change. Large canopy mature trees situated within urban or built-up areas are particularly valuable for the ecosystem service benefits, biodiversity and regulating effects they provide, which is an important mitigating factor in response to the effects of a changing climate. A tempo assessment, which stands for Tree Evaluation Method for Preservation Orders, which is in Appendix 2 of the committee report, was undertaken to support the decision. The order was made and served on all interested parties. That's a view of the sycamore tree to the end of the rear garden. Several objections were received from neighbouring properties as detailed within the report. The main points of the objection received are concerns over the safety of the tree, the danger it poses and potential for damage to neighbouring property, the order being used as a reason not to manage the tree, and the tree not providing any value as a public amenity. The objections are detailed in the report, but specific concern was raised over the tree having two stems. I don't know if you can see in the picture, but it is a twin stem tree. Reference being made of a split codominant trunk and as a structural defect and weakness. Also, concerns were raised over rot in the stem with soil heaped around the base. In response to the objections, with particular emphasis on safety concerns, another site visit was made by the senior tree officer and I to assess the tree in more detail. We were content with the overall structural condition during our inspection, which included the junction between the two stems and the wound present on the stem. At the time of our visit, the tree appeared to be in reasonable physiological condition, and these factors would not, in our view, prejudice its potential for protection by tree preservation order. I'll just show you some images of the lower stem here. You've got the north side of the stem on the left, the eastern side with a wound there. This is the junction between the two stems. So that's a closer view of the junction and the bark wound on the eastern side. The presence of a tree preservation order does not absolve the tree owner of the general responsibility for the tree or trees concerned. So the general duty of care they have to the neighbours with regards to safety still applies. The condition of a tree changes over time, so regular routine inspections are advised as part of its general routine management. An order should not restrict the reasonable routine maintenance of a tree, provided the work conforms to good arboricultural practice and does not adversely impact on the tree or the amenity it provides. An application for works to a protected tree does not involve a fee and would take up to a maximum of 8 weeks. You can see on the upper stem there, the trees had had some pruning work done on the lateral branches. It's also had the top reduced slightly as well, so it's had routine maintenance carried out in the past. We feel the positive contribution and benefits the tree provides to the locality outweigh any negative impact that may be experienced. So the matter here to consider is whether it would be expedient to confirm the order to provide continued protection for the tree in terms of the public amenity it provides. And that concludes the presentation. Sorry, here's my conclusion. The sycamore provides positive contribution to the public area, meets the criteria in terms of public amenity, would be expedient to protect it due to the potential pressure for its removal or work that may detrimentally affect its amenity value. The recommendation is to confirm the order in the interest of public amenity. And that is the end. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So you just need to consider the objections on this one. So does anybody have any questions or comments to make? Councillor Dowd.
Could I just clarify your comment about it being in reasonable condition? Is this a technical term where reasonable actually means it's good, like an acceptable standard actually means it's fine? Because reasonable is quite an imprecise term otherwise.
Yeah, sure. I mean, we looked at the overall structural condition. We're content with the junction between the two main stems. We viewed the tree in autumn, winter time, so it was hard to fully evaluate the physiological condition, but it does appear to be in good overall condition. So we're content that it's satisfactory to warrant a tree preservation order.
Sorry, can I just come back on that one? Do you have defined terms that you use for different degrees of health in a tree? So reasonable would be the sort of lowest level a good standard?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the condition of the tree and the visual appearance changes over time. So we viewed it in autumn, winter. So we didn't get a good view of its physiological condition, but it appears to us to be in good overall condition. So we're happy that it is satisfactory.
Thank you.
Councillor Wade?
Are we debate or questions, or is this everything? Because I just want to ask to clarify. Oh, right, a mixture of the two then. I mean, the key issue for me is the safety of the tree, because I come from an area with lots of trees and some of them fall down. Sadly, some of them fall down on houses. However, I do know of the very high standard to which NFDC inspects trees. And I know that as a fact. And if you and our tree officer have looked at it and said you think it's healthy, it's not a danger, I take that as a good recommendation. It's very prominent in the area because you can see it, as you can tell that. So, but its very prominence gives it a lot of amenity value in the visual amenity, because we have trees, and the more trees we have, it's better for everybody. The only concern is it's actually located right bang in the middle of a range of houses, isn't it? Where if it fell over, there would be a problem. So if it's safe, and our officers say it's safe, then I'm quite happy that we should confirm the TPO.
Okay, so that's debate. That wasn't a question, was it? So, yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's Councillor Sleep.
And when they were in debate, thank you, Chair, I'd just like to say that I think it's a fabulous tree. I'd be delighted. I've looked on Google Maps to see the view from all the different streets where it is visible. I suspect tremendously that all the neighbours kick off because of the helicopter seats. I permanently every year pick them out of my garden this high, but I'm delighted that they're down the road. So as far as I'm concerned, I'd much rather look at the wildlife in that tree than just the space in the sky.
Thank you. Councillor Woods.
I'd like to support what Councillor Sleep has just said. I have two particularly large trees in my garden that the neighbours complain about. They're both tree protected orders. They do provide wonderful wildlife. They provide lots of work for me. But as my neighbour once said, those trees have been here longer than I have, and they have a right to stay where they are.
I think we're all quite happy to go to the vote, aren't we? Do I need a proposer? That's right. I still need a proposer then to it. Councillor Sleep and Councillor Davis. So the recommendation is then to confirm the tree preservation order, proposed by Councillor Sleep and seconded by Councillor Davis. All in favour, please raise your hands. Unanimous? Yeah. And that, no, he's not voting. He's not. No. Okay. That's all done then. Done for the morning. We're closed the meeting now, so enjoy the rest.